longer be leader of the Liberal Party and ultimately effectively no longer Prime Minister. As you were hearing on World Report in early March, we will know who the new leader and PM will be. But how has media in the United States been covering the resignation of Justin Trudeau? We're going to dig into that with an interview. Also, staying with politics, as the Liberal Party gears up for a snap leadership race, we'll have a look at the top contenders for the role in some detail. Stay with us. So lots of politics. Also, I want to mention that we're going to learn more about a bill that was making its way through Parliament to recognize Métis nations across the country, and then why it was stopped and how proroguing is going to affect everything. So stay tuned for that straight ahead. Right now, though, Heather Wells is in with other developing stories from Manitoba. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg woman says she is angry and does not trust the healthcare system after waiting 24 hours for care at the Health Sciences Centre. Rosemarie Figueroa is speaking out after hearing about the man who died while waiting in that hospital's ER earlier this week. We're going to hear her story coming up. As well, the head of the Assembly of First Nations is flatly rejecting Donald Trump's recent musings about annexing Canada. National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanek says the U.S. President-elect's comments are disrespectful to all Indigenous people and their ancestral lands. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 6:30.
Heather Wells, how much did you enjoy that weather yesterday?
It was beautiful. It felt like spring.
Right? It was so melty, and the only thing that was really unfortunate in my life was I'd washed the car.
I know. Yeah. Mine's a mess too.
Never do that. Do it at night when there are less cars on the road.
Well, I'd washed it kind of like before on the weekend, Abby. That's Abby Adiyemi coming to the airwaves. You guys both had pretty clean cars too earlier in the week. I mean, mine was done when it was frigidly cold, and then now that the weather changed, not so much.
Yeah, it's a little messy now out there.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Heather. I know you got to get back to the news center. Yeah.
It was slushy.
Slushy. My bulldogs, though, were pretty happy. You know, I see all these videos of huskies out there, and they're like running in the snow, and they love the cold. Bulldogs are the opposite for people that don't live with them. You open the door, they feel the cold, and they look at you like, are you crazy? And then they back up. Mine actually back up, and they sit down, and they look at me like, no, I'm going to hold it all day. And they do. They will like not go out all day until they finally have to, and then they run out like crazy business. Yesterday, they were like, oh, what's this? So yes, they were out in the afternoon and the evening, and kind of felt like a stolen day. It was so warm, you know.
It's like that one day in the forecast that just gives you hope, and then go, we still remember what it feels like.
Yeah, it was nice. It was nice. All right, what are we getting today in the weather?
Well, it's not going to be like yesterday, though. Still kind of mild, but a chilly start. Temperatures well below freezing in most of the regions. We will be seeing cloudy skies and a slight chance of light snow in some areas, though there will be moments of sunshine as the day progresses today in most regions in the south. But in the northern part of the province, we're looking at cold and extreme chills. Winnipeg, currently we are at -11. We're seeing light snow falling at the airport. The forecast for Winnipeg and surrounding areas says we're going to start the days cloudy. Then there's a slight chance of little snow in the forecast somewhere there, but don't worry, the clouds will be breaking up, and then we'll see a mix of sun and clouds later. Light winds will keep things chill, and then temperatures will be dropping to around -15 this afternoon. Though the wind chill this morning, if you're making transition from one bus to another, it's going to feel like -24. So we're talking about a cool afternoon. And in other regions, cold, cloudy, slight chance of snow in some areas, sunshine. But in the southern region, the Interlake region is going to be feeling like -30 this morning. So you want to take care if you're in the Gimli area. It's going to feel like the wind chill is going to feel like -30. While for folks in Churchill, it's going to be near -40. So it's still that brutal cold up there. But for Winnipeg today, we're looking at a cloudy start, a slight chance of snow, and then we'll see a mix of sun and clouds, and temperatures will be dropping to -15 today.
Anything to report early on traffic? I know you're covering this morning.
Nothing in traffic, but just be careful. Four-way stops, it's always slippery. That is one thing you need to take into consideration. You see anything out there, let us know. 788-3093.
Well, the end of 2024 was a busy and contentious period, specifically for Métis politics. A first-of-its-kind treaty was signed, and a Métis governance bill was stopped All of this came with some controversy that could, in fact, spill into this new year. The CBC's Stephanie Cram has been covering the stories, and she spoke about it yesterday with CBC's Chloe Friesen.
So tell us about this first ever treaty that was signed.
In November, the federal government signed its first ever modern treaty with the Métis government, with, as you said, the Manitoba Métis Federation in Winnipeg. And the treaty is being hailed as a pivotal moment for Canada and the Métis people. The treaty affirms the MMF's inherent rights to self-government, as well as lawmaking powers over citizenship, elections, and internal operations. This treaty has deep historic roots, originating when Manitoba was welcomed into Confederation. The Métis helped draft the Manitoba Act of 1870, and they were initially promised land and economic opportunities, but the federal government at the time did not follow through on those commitments. These promises are now guiding the creation of this modern Métis treaty. During a speech at the ceremony, MMF President David Chartrand got emotional explaining why the treaty was so important to him.
People that know what our people have suffered through, being treated as worse than second class, being pushed to the side, and always watching everybody else get everything. You know how hard that is to tell your people, your family, that it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. But to this day forward is going to change.
Now, unlike the numbered treaties with First Nations, this treaty does not include fishing and harvesting rights, education, child welfare, land claims, and health coverage.
But there was some controversy, so what happened?
In December, the Dakota Teepee First Nation and the Chenupawakpa Dakota Nation filed a motion in Manitoba's Court of King's Bench for an injunction against the federal government, saying the Métis Treaty infringes on their rights. The nation says that they have been in the province longer and that the federal government has a duty to work with them before the Métis. The Dakotas did not sign on to Treaty 1, which is the treaty of that region, and includes 7 other First Nations, and they now want the federal government to fix that wrong. It all boils down to the history of the nation. Some say the Dakotas are originally from the United States, and there is proof of that history. Many Dakotas fought in the War of 1812. The nation says they are originally from Canada, and while some of them fought in that war, many of them returned to the Canadian prairies. Here's Dakota Teepee First Nation councillor Carl Stone on why he wanted a motion for an injunction to stop the treaty.
Sick and kind of tired of hearing the same old excuse to exclude us from the rights to our territory. And that's why we're fighting today to take back what was taken from our people. So this land belongs to Dakota people.
The federal government is working to fix this wrong. In July, federal Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Gary Anand-Desangri apologized to the Dakotas for being left out of Canada's history books.
Stephanie, what did Manitoba Métis have to say about the motion for injunction?
I spoke to the MMF president, David Chartrand, who says he's not at all surprised by the motion. He says that the Dakota Teepee First Nation are very litigious and have a few cases on the go right now. Chartrand told me he's worried that if they are granted the injunction, it could impact the rights of Treaty 1 First Nations. What he wants to see is that the Métis Treaty coexists alongside a modern Dakota Teepee Treaty and Treaty 1.
There is no such thing as a hierarchy of rights where First Nation has greater rights than the Métis and Inuit. There's no hierarchy of rights in this country. Section 35 rights are very explicitly clear. We've won our cases in the courts already. Our rights in Section 35 protects our rights to resources and harvesting for our families and feeding our families our traditional food.
The Manitoba Métis Federation said there is no update on the injunction yet, and it is still ongoing.
We mentioned earlier that the Manitoba Métis was also speaking out about a different bill. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's Bill C-53, which was a bill that intended to have 3 Métis organizations recognized as governments, including the nations in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario. But we learned that the bill will not be moving forward in its current form, which was confirmed by the Office of the Minister of Indigenous and Crown Relations. It's a decision that President Chartrand applauds. He says the issue he has with the bill is the amount of recognition it gives to the Métis Nation of Ontario, an organization he accuses of watering down Métis national identity. He also accuses the MNO of falsely recognizing 6 historic Métis communities in Ontario, which he says are not part of the Métis homeland. For Métis Nation of Ontario President Margaret Froh, the fact the bill has been quashed is disappointing.
It was the first Métis piece of federal recognition legislation. It's disappointing that it is not moving forward. We have a legally binding self-government agreement with Canada, though, that ensures that if the federal recognition legislation that Canada introduces fails, that another bill will be introduced later on, and it will be when the time is right.
Now, the reason the federal government says the bill will not move forward is because it has lost support from the nations. In fact, the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan fully pulled their support for the bill.
Stephanie, where does everything stand now?
At this point, Bill C-53 is stuck in the report phase of a bill, and it will not go on to a third reading. The feds did not give us any indication of what a future version of the bill could look like. As for the Métis Nations, they have all signed self-government agreements. The Métis Nation of Saskatchewan already has a draft of their own treaty, and both the Métis Nations of Alberta and Ontario have told me that they too are hoping to start drafting their own treaties.
That is Stephanie Cram, who's a reporter with CBC Indigenous. She was speaking with the CBC's Chloe Friesen. If you want to read more about both of the stories, you can please check out the website. It's cbc.ca/news/Indigenous. Well, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's resignation announcement on Monday rocked Canadian politics, but how was this reported in the U.S.? And what do Americans think of President-elect Donald Trump's taunting of Canada as a potential 51st state? Thomas Schaller is with us to talk about it. He's a political scientist at the University of Maryland. He is in Washington, D.C. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
It was fascinating to me to hear how our story meeting was talking about this. And, in Canada here and all the reporters. And then I went home in the afternoon. I was watching American television networks, and it was just a different tone. Justin Trudeau, speaking of which, was on CNN yesterday. He's going to be on MSNBC. In your view, and for those that haven't been plugging in, how has mainstream media in the U.S. been covering Trudeau's resignation announcement?
Well, I think as an announcement, it's been covered similar to international stories in terms of the depth, which is not much, and the amount of time spent on it. A little bit more than a story perhaps out of Europe or China or Iran, just because you're a North American neighbor and border neighbor and our largest trading partner, and of course trade and immigration and the border issues are very top of the mind, especially with Trump's reelection. But I think more interesting is like the subset of the conservative media, which views, Trudeau's decline, his 20% approval rating, and what I believe almost every political scientist and pollster and pundit in your country is predicting is, a resurgence here of the Tories and a likely Tory government at some point when you guys have your elections between now and October. And whether or not that implies a Trumpification or magnification of Ottawa. And I think that's going to be the more interesting story in 2025.
Absolutely. Now, yesterday on one of the American networks, what I was sort of found interesting was they were making a straight line between Trump's threats to take over Canada effectively and Trudeau's resignation, like nothing about anything else. And most Canadians would be like, what? Watching the year that we've had. So that to me was incorrect reporting. How is Trudeau himself viewed in the U.S. in terms of, the man, I guess, and his policies?
Well, I've been doing Canadian radio analysis since 2004, and periodically I have to remind and apologize to Canadian listeners that what Americans know about Ottawa and what's happening in Canada is far smaller than what Canadians are in terms of their level of coverage and following U.S. media and what's happening in Washington. Most Americans couldn't tell you, say that child poverty reduction or reconciling with Indigenous peoples or whatever Trudeau considers his signature, policy achievements. They couldn't identify that. Trudeau, ironically now, I think he's the most senior member, longstanding member of the G7 leadership. And so Americans are familiar with him, certainly. He's a legacy politician, and his father and his name, is familiar to Americans. But I actually found a 2017 poll that I think is relevant from 8 years ago when Trump was just starting his first term after winning in 2016 that showed that 40% of Americans didn't want Canada to become a 51st state. They wanted Trudeau to replace Trump as our president, Now, granted, that's probably almost all of the Hillary Clinton liberal and Democratic voters who were shell-shocked by Trump's victory in the first place. But, polling about Justin Trudeau is not a hot topic for pollsters in America. It's not something on the forefront of Americans' minds.
Of course. I mean, I shouldn't say of course, but I mean, that's when you think about the differences in the countries, also the sizes of the countries and just how,
Sure.
And what's at stake for Canadians to plug into American news is very different than what's at stake for Americans to plug into our news.
That's right.
So let's talk about the 51st state thing, Thomas. I mean, Trump's been repeating these taunts that Canada's a great candidate for a 51st U.S. state. This was in our story meeting too. So there was this whole discussion about rhetoric or bluster or, don't worry or worry. And when I watched American news, it was taken much more seriously. How should Canadians understand why he is doing this? What's your sense of this?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, Marcy, it's bluster. Trump is schooled at the knee of Roy Cohn, his mentor in New York City. Cohn is always say, you never admit anything, deny everything, always claim victory. And Trump has a pattern. He considers himself a great deal maker. And so like a used car salesman, he starts off with an outrageous opening bid, or just like a tout at a bazaar. Like, you ask for the highest price for your goods at the table, and you know that you're going to get negotiated down. And so, there's something to be said for this skill. Like Trudeau said yesterday on CNN, like he's got everybody talking about that, not talking about what the actual economic implications are if he really did put 25% tariffs on concrete and lumber and oil and gas, which would directly raise the prices of all those goods in the United States as imports, or raise the prices on everything made from lumber and concrete, like American homes. Trump isn't going to do any of that, I don't think. He's going to put some selective tariffs on some goods coming in from some countries, just like he's not going to deport 15 million immigrants who are working at the cheapest price point, and there are not enough Americans who are willing to, pick cabbages and change baskets in hotels and do all of the tough construction work. And so that would raise the prices on all the domestic production. So those are two inflationary policies, tariffs and removing the cheap immigrant labor, for a guy who just won by running against inflation and the Biden era. So Trump's going to talk a good game, and then he's going to declare victory no matter what happens, just like he said he would build a wall across the entire Mexico border and didn't, and would get Mexico to pay for it, and they didn't pay a cent.
Having said that, Thomas, obviously some of this is being taken seriously and has to be. We're in a time where we have leaders who are trying to create a new world order and trying to change, really effectively trying to change things. And we have obviously people comparing Trump, talking about Trump, I should say not comparing, but talking about Trump in the same context as looking at what Putin did to take over Crimea and Ukraine. Very different. And yet, when Trump has said something in the past, he has done it. Mostly. You're talking about the wall and he didn't. But do you think he is serious about this? If that question makes sense. Do you think...
Well, how is he going to overtake Canada without Canada's permission? That's why I think it's more telling, not what Trudeau is saying about it, but what the Conservatives will say about it. Because if Trump views himself as this leader of this global economic, mostly white, male, younger-led populist revolt that we're seeing in Turkey, like you said, in Putin and Hungary and other places, right? Like Steve Bannon, his advisor, believes he's building this transatlantic, white-led economic populist revolt against immigration and so forth. And now maybe Trump and the MAGA Republicans here are sizing up Canada as the next sort of domino to fall. Then it really, obviously Trudeau and the Liberals wouldn't go for that. The real question is whether or not, if there's an incoming Tory government, whether or not they're going to accede to Trump's demands. That's why I said at the top, I think 2025's interesting story is not so much Trudeau's departure and his 20% approval ratings, but what replaces him.
Mm-hmm. Really interesting to talk with you this morning, Thomas. We'll talk again, obviously. Thanks for your time.
Great to be here. Cheers.
That is Thomas Schaller. He's, Schaller. I believe I've been saying Schaller, political scientist at the University of Maryland. We did reach him in Washington, D.C. We'll still talk about the candidates for leader of the Liberal Party and effectively who's going to be our prime minister come early March. That conversation and interviews in the second half of our show here, or second half of this hour, rather, coming up just before 7. I'm R.C. Marcusa. You are with Information Radio, the morning show, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. And business news is coming up after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30 it is -11. Mild now, but our temperature is going to fall as the sky clears. down to about minus 15 this afternoon, and then periods of snow beginning overnight, lasting into tomorrow. A Winnipeg woman says she doesn't trust the healthcare system after waiting 24 hours for care at the Health Sciences Centre. Rosemarie Figueroa is speaking out after hearing about the man who died while waiting in that hospital's ER earlier this week. In late November, Figueroa says her family doctor recommended she go to the ER over concerns her cough and difficulty breathing were symptoms of a pulmonary embolism. She says a doctor at Seven Oaks came to the same conclusion and gave her medication, ordering the scans she needed, but not before she first waited 24 hours at HSC without being seen and then went to Seven Oaks.
Feeling emotional because this has not had just happened to me. It's been happening to everybody else, right? Our lives is very, very much dependent on those people who are in front of the triage. So they decide whether they push you in or they don't. It's just so sad.
Sherrod Health says while the highest acuity patients are seen first, other patients are checked on and reassessed according to their initial triage. The Manitoba First Nations Police Service has named an interim chief following the death of its police chief. Doug Paulson died in a house fire Wednesday morning. Inspector Jason Colin will step into the chief's role for the foreseeable future. Paulson is being remembered as a dedicated leader and trailblazer in First Nations policing. The Manitoba First Nations Police Service is planning a formal tribute to celebrate Paulson's life and career. The head of the Assembly of First Nations is flatly rejecting Donald Trump's recent musings about annexing Canada. National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak says the U.S. President-elect's comments are disrespectful to all Indigenous peoples and their ancestral lands. But she has been heartened, she says, by reaction of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Both leaders have said they'd never allow Canada to become a 51st state.
Certainly, if there's one thing that Justin and Pierre are united on, I think it's this. And I'm glad that this country is having this discussion, but at the same time, it's alarming. I mean, I never thought we'd have this discussion at this time in our history, and it's important that First Nations voices are not left out of that.
Woodhouse-Nepenak says the Assembly plans to reach out to Trump once he is sworn in as president later this month. To California now, where at least 10 people are dead, more than 10,000 structures destroyed. 5 wildfires continue raging in and around Los Angeles. More than 180,000 people are out of their homes, while the fire emergency is nowhere close to being over. Mayor Karen Bass says the city is looking to rebuild aggressively.
The city of Los Angeles will lead in this effort in the areas that are impacted by the city. We are going to clear the red tape and unnecessary delays and cost and headaches that people experience in ordinary times so that we can rebuild your homes quickly.
Police believe at least one of the fires has been deliberately set. They have a suspect in custody, and 20 other people have been arrested for looting. National Guard troops have arrived in L.A. to keep order. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. Climate change is being blamed for making those wildfires more intense. There is now word 2024 was, in fact, Earth's hottest year ever. The word from several weather monitoring agencies who say temperatures temporarily rose more than the 1.5 degree benchmark set by the 2015 Paris Climate Act. The previous record was in 2023. A researcher from the University of Manitoba is part of an international team that has drilled what is believed to be the world's longest continuous record of ice in a remote site in Antarctica. The 2,800-meter ice core is expected to reveal Earth's historical climate patterns going back more than 1.2 million years. John Higgins is a member of the U.S. National Science Foundation Center for Oldest Ice Research and Exploration.
The continuous record is kind of a whole book that goes back 1.2 million years. We are in the practice of kind of finding bits of ice that are much older but are kind of incomplete books or only part of a book.
The research project involved collaboration between scientific and logistical teams from across Europe. The ice core extraction was the result of extensive work using radar to map out a spot to drill. You can read more about that on our website this morning. And other news as well is there, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Very interesting story, right? Let's get into what's happening in the weather situation. Abby is here. We won't be melting quite as much as yesterday, Abby.
No, good morning once again. We're still below zero in most parts of the province this morning. Expect a cloudy day, light snow in some areas in the forecast. The wind chill is even going to make it feel colder. In Winnipeg, currently -11, cloudy conditions we're seeing at this time. There's a slight chance of light snow in the forecast. Then we see some sunshine mixed with clouds. Temperatures for Winnipeg will drop to -15 by the afternoon period. But the wind chill this morning is making it feel colder. It's around -24. And then tomorrow, some snow in the forecast. Heading west, Brandon is currently at -12. We're seeing light snow falling in that part of the province. The forecast for the Westman region calls for mainly cloudy skies, slight chance of light snow this morning, and then the temperatures will be reaching around -8, though the wind chill feels like -25 this morning. Then it improves to around -14 as you get to the lunch period. In the Pembina Valley region, we're looking at similar conditions to Winnipeg, temperatures around -12. In the Parkland region, -13 in Dauphin, partly cloudy conditions. Expect this to stay with you for some time this morning. Then we'll see a transition to a mix of sun and clouds later. It's going to feel chilly with a high of -10, though the wind chill makes it feel colder for folks in Dauphin. In Gimli, we're seeing temperatures around -13 at this time. For the Interlake region, we're looking at cloudy skies, a slight chance of snow this morning. Then we're going to see a mix of sun and clouds later in the day. Temperatures around -19 for now, but the wind chill feels like -30. So for folks in Gimli, you want to take care. Now, looking at conditions up north for the Flin-Flon and surrounding areas, temperatures around -22, mainly cloudy skies. We're seeing there's going to be more clouds out than light snow expected from the noon period. Temperatures will be reaching -14. For the north, Thompson is around -26 with light snow at this time, though you see some sunny skies later. Don't let that fool you. It's going to feel like -20, so it's still a chilly day. And then Churchill is sitting at -27 at this time. We're seeing light snow and it's whipping around. We're going to see cloudy conditions with that, though that would clear later. The wind chill makes it feel like -40 this morning, so frostbite's possible in minutes. In summary, down south, the weather is cold, but we're going to see more like cloudy conditions, light snow, a break of a mix of sun and clouds here and there, and the temperature is just going to be chilly. But up north, that's where we see that possibility of frostbite in minutes with conditions in Churchill.
All right, Abby. Well, I was just looking on the Traffic Management Center on X. I didn't see anything new. Anything to add from your point of view?
I just need to tell you, around the perimeter, it's partly covered, but I see the plows tracking them at this point. They're doing their thing, so you might be encountering some plows. So factor that into your commute this morning if you're either commuting into the city or heading out. And this is around the perimeter, and even if you head towards East St. Paul and the Highway 75 all the way to the Emerson border, you're noticing the plows on that highway.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Chrisley Ramlickan's here now with our business news this Friday morning. Hello.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So let's start with the cost of housing. You have the latest on the cost of renting.
Yes, so average asking rents fell nationally to just over $2,100 last month. And that marks a 17-month low, according to a new report from rentals.ca and Urbanation. So average asking rents across Canada were down on average 3.2% compared to the year before. And December marked the 5th consecutive month of declines. But we have to remember that decline follows growth of almost 9% in 2023 and 12% in 2022. So prices have been elevated. And in fact, rents are still almost 17% higher than they were 5 years ago. But we saw the rental market soften last year after more apartments were built, slowing population inflows, and a weakening economy. And the average asking rent for apartment and condo listings, there in Winnipeg was just over $1,600 last month, which is actually an increase of 4% compared to last year. So Manitoba, a little bit of a different story compared to the national story. Manitoba actually led all provinces for rent growth this year with a 5% increase to $1,618.
Not great news, but maybe not a surprise to renters who are listening here. I asked on Facebook about rent and just got a huge thread back from folks how tough it is. Let's go to another story here. A Canadian company that's processed plant-based milk linked to listeria has now closed plants. What are the details?
Yes, so Joe Ricky, the company that processed milk linked to a deadly listeria outbreak, has permanently closed all 4 of its plants. The company says it has faced significant challenges after a product recall, including loss of business. And the Toronto-based company says the majority of its employees have been laid off, so hundreds of workers have been let go. The company closed 2 of its plants in Ontario, 1 in BC, and 1 in Pennsylvania. And the company says it has filed for creditor protection and does not have the finances to maintain operations and does not have any plans to reopen these plants. So Joe Ricky owes more than 100 organizations over $200 million, including $775,000 in unpaid wages. So some people still waiting to get paid. Now, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency says the company's Pickering, Ontario plant was the source of a listeria outbreak that led to 3 deaths. The outbreak infected at least 20 people in Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and Alberta. And several plant-based milks, including almond, oat, and coconut, under the Silk and Great Value brands that Joe Ricky packaged, were part of the recall. So Great Value is Walmart Canada's store brand, and Danone, which makes Silk products, says production from the affected facility was moved elsewhere in its North American network after that recall.
And finally today, as people might have heard on World Report, the U.S. Supreme Court is hearing arguments in regards to the government's plan to ban TikTok. How could that affect Canadian creators?
Well, many Canadian creators have American audiences. So, if those Americans don't have access to the app, that wouldn't be great for the Canadian creators. They're going to lose part of their audience and their engagement. So the government in the U.S. wants to ban the video app if its Chinese owner ByteDance does not sell to a non-Chinese company. And the U.S. government sees the Chinese ownership as a national security threat because it believes the Chinese government could access American users' data. And there's also fear that China could use the powerful algorithm to spread disinformation. So the company Clark Influence specializes in influencer marketing and is based in Montreal. Aisling Smith is an account director in Toronto and says the agency works with 250 brands in Canada and upwards of 1,000 influencers a year, and she believes most of them would be affected by the ban.
We're all kind of waiting with bated breath to see what the updates there are and then to see if there's any movement on things before January 19th. But definitely a tierce, intense time for those of us in the influencer and creator marketing industry for the next couple of weeks.
So as she was just mentioning there, the Supreme Court has until Sunday, January 19th to turn around a decision before the TikTok ban goes into effect.
And finally, what is happening in the markets so far this morning?
In Europe, markets are mixed. Germany is up, the UK is down, France is up. In Asia, markets are losing right now. So Japan, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are all down. Oil is up at $2.31 to $76.23 US per barrel. Gold is up $8.60 to $2,679.40 US per ounce. And the dollar is down 0.07 of a cent to 69.4 cents US.
All right, Crystal Lee Ramachan, have a great weekend.
You too, Marcy. Thank you.
Crystal Lee with our business news this morning. Time right now is 6:44 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app and YouTube. Thank you for joining us. Minus 11 in Winnipeg, light snow falling. Winds are west at 15. Now we are winds are northwest at 17. We are the warm spot in the province right now at that minus 11. As Abby's been mentioning, bit of a split north and south in the province today. Much milder in the south. Thompson with partly cloudy skies and minus 26, and even colder up in Churchill this morning. Still ahead in this half hour of the program, you might have heard on World Report, and if you're just waking up and haven't yet heard, it will be the first week of March when the Liberal leader will be chosen, and we're going to tee up some of the people that have already people are already talking about as potential leadership candidates. So that interview is coming up still ahead in this half hour of the show. Well, if you were with our program earlier in the week, then you would have heard a story about the ABC song. It's been floating around for a number of years, this new version, but it's really taken off this year, and it's even made its way into some classrooms. So we were in a classroom in Winnipeg where some little kids were singing the quote-unquote newest version of the ABC song. But one thing I wanted to do is play a few different versions back to back for you. And so let's start first with the old version, which is you're going to get from me. So I'll just do it quick. This is the one I would have grown up with. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Now I know my ABCs. Next time, won't you sing with me? Sometimes the N is a little bit altered. And of course, sometimes Canadians like to say Z, but then you lose the rhyme. This is the quote unquote new version.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. I like the ABCs. I like the ABCs. Yay!
Or boo. Or yay. Of course, it's all up to how you want to learn your ABCs. But Faith Fundal, who we are missing right now on our team because Faith's just taking some time off and we'll be back, I think, next week. But Faith has been on leave. Faith couldn't resist tuning in. Of course, Faith, the host of Up to Speed, and has been hearing our coverage of this. And so I want to give Faith credit for sending this in because I personally think that this should be the new version of the ABCs.
All right, Christy, you better get it right now.
This is Patti LaBelle's and the Muppets version.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Hear me sing from A to Z. I'm gonna do it again, so do it again. Everybody sing.
Wait for it. Come on, Abby.
Woo, now you learned your ABCs.
Man.
It's like a walkout song.
Woo, woo, woo. Abby and I, if you're watching on YouTube, we're trying to sing along, keep up with Patti LaBelle. Isn't that just the greatest version of the ABCs you ever heard?
I would sing this walking out.
No one can sing like Patti LaBelle, though, man, right? Just incredible. You'll find that video somewhere online. It's an oldie but a goodie, just amazing. Patti LaBelle and the Muppets and that version of the ABCs. 9 minutes to 7 o'clock now on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. And let's get to our next conversation about Liberal leadership. So March 9th is the date that the Liberal Party will elect a new leader and effectively the next Prime Minister of Canada. The party made that announcement last night. That's when the race to replace Justin Trudeau will end. Now, some members have cautiously put their names forward for the role. Others are calling for tighter rules as the party votes for the new leader. And they changed some things, including upping the limited cost to get into the race. So Laurie Turnbull's here to talk about it, professor of political science at Dalhousie University. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So what's your reaction now that we have this date set for the when the new leader is going to be chosen?
Oh, this is going to be short. This is going to be fast. But we knew that, right? They don't have much to work with in terms of timing. They have to be back to the House of Commons by March 24th. So the March 9th date basically gives the new leader 2 weeks to, be sworn in as Prime Minister, come up with a speech from the throne, figure out how they're going to market themselves. And also, as soon as they get into the House of Commons, it sounds like the opposition parties want to defeat the government. So the person will be into an election right away.
What are the key challenges and calculations going on right now within the party when it comes to finding their next leader? And what do you make of the fact that they, because of some of those discussions, they've already made changes to what it takes to get in the race?
Okay, so, I think there was a long time push. There was a lot of conversations about when Justin Trudeau would announce that he would step aside. I think it seems to me this wasn't something he really wanted to do, but he did it because he felt he had to. And so their immediate challenge is going to be to find the person who can make them more competitive in the next election. I think that is going to be the key, or else this has all been a waste of time, right? Like, they need to find someone who will get them to show up differently in the next election so that the seat count is more positive for them. I think there's a broader project around the rebuild here. I think this has been Justin Trudeau's party for a long time, and whoever does take this on, no matter what happens in the next election, has to do, there's work around figuring out where the party is now, where it fits on the party, in the party system, what are the principles and values, what it motivates it, all that kind of stuff. In terms of changes that the party has made for this race, it used to be the case that if you were someone who ordinarily resides in Canada, you could register as a Liberal and participate as a voter in this sort of thing, or as a candidate. But now they have closed that over, so you have to be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident. And that addresses some of the concerns that we've heard come up over the past number of days in terms of vulnerability to interference. And so I'm not surprised they made that decision.
What about the monetary decision? This is a significant jump. The party's setting the entry fee for potential candidates. It used to be $75,000. Now it is $350,000. How might that affect who gets in this race?
They're trying to keep a shorter ballot. They don't want, at this point, it is not the time for a whole bunch of people to jump into this race. Some of them because they really want to win and are competitive, and others because they want to, kind of get their feet wet, get to be more well-known, build their profile, represent a wing of the party that they think is important. It is not the time for that. They need a more streamlined ballot, people who are very competitive and who can hit the ground running with this, right? They don't have time for anybody to be in this, and especially if someone were to win without much political experience, they are looking for someone who has experience, who can fundraise, who can, who kind of already has a lot of that political campaigning communication stuff worked out. And so this is entirely meant to skew the race to people who have those networks and stuff already.
Can you walk us through the two, in your view, who the two top frontrunners might be?
So I would say Chrystia Freeland, former finance minister, and Mark Carney, former Bank of Canada governor. And even, they're front runners, but they're not, it's not like they're a Poilievre or a Trudeau. There's no one, it seems to me, who stands out as an obvious front runner by a mile who is the person to beat and will likely take it on the first ballot. I think this will be a competition. It will go more than... I don't think anyone will win it by majority number one votes on the first ballot. I think it will be a deeper competition than that, because I think that even among Liberals, even among registered Liberals, there's not huge name recognition for some of these people, and in a broader Canadian public, there's definitely not. And so that's going to be a challenge too, just to get some attention to this thing.
And beyond those two names, where else would you go from there? Obviously, Dominic Lebon, the finance minister, now his name has come up as well, and probably because of experience. Why might he say no to the job, and what have you heard about him?
So he's saying no because it sounds like by like reading his letter, it sounds like his job as Minister of Finance and as a point person in the negotiations with the U.S. government and with Donald Trump and his team, that's taking up LeBlanc's time, and that's his focus. I have no idea how he would have done those two things at once. Like, I think he would have had to choose, and it sounds like he's going to keep his focus where it is for right now. There are people who are calling for him to reconsider, and I think one of the reasons for that is his style, his communication style, very no-nonsense, very personable, very direct, kind of funny, has a sense of humor. He would have been, I think, very effective at going toe-to-toe with Pierre Poilievre. And that's probably one reason why some caucus members are saying, I wish LeBlanc stayed in.
Foreign Minister Melanie Joly's name is also one we should mention because she has said she's considering a leadership bid. What do you think goes into the calculation of a candidate currently not fully into the race? I mean, do you have to think about the job that would she be able to do any of her job as foreign minister if she does throw her name into the race? How does that actually even work?
Yeah, I mean, it's not unusual for people who are in cabinet who decide to throw their hat into the race for a leadership bid to stay in cabinet. But I think the complexities around the timing right now are something that is, like, that's unusual, right? Like, it's one thing if a leadership race is going on for months and months and you can continue your ministerial portfolio at the same time as you're campaigning, you're meeting people, you're fundraising. But this is like going to be some kind of power race where this is going to require, I would have to think, a heck of a lot of attention and focus from the people who are running. And she too is involved in the negotiations with the Trump administration or the incoming administration. It feels like he's there already. And so I think those sorts of things would have to be taken into account. I think, what's going to happen in the next election, right? Like, a person would have to calculate, how do I think I would do as a leader who is running at a time where the Liberals are doing so poorly in the polls? Am I prepared to do the rebuild if we lose? Am I prepared to sit on the backbench when I used to be in cabinet? Like, those are hard decisions to make.
Laurie, thank you for this. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Laurie Turnbull, Professor of Political Science at Dalhousie University. We're going to hear more about what's going on with this Homeworld Report in a few minutes. Right now, Heather Wells has Manitoba headlines.
Good morning. Well, the head of the Assembly of First Nations is flatly rejecting Donald Trump's recent musings about annexing Canada. National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepanak says the U.S. President-elect's comments are disrespectful to all Indigenous people and their ancestral lands. A researcher from the University of Manitoba is part of an international team of scientists who have drilled what is believed to be the world's longest continuous record of ice at a remote site in Antarctica. We'll hear more about that in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather. It is in Winnipeg -11, a high today of, not a high. Temperature falling today to -15, and we are going to have some light snow with us this morning. In traffic, you might want to watch it on the perimeter as well as just a little bit greasy out there on the streets potentially. So 788-3093 if you do need to reach us. Also, there's an alert for Burroughs Avenue, Arlington to St. Clair. There's a complete closure there due to a fire. So just to reiterate that, use alternate routes, please. Still ahead, the Manitoba government's decision to lower the certification requirements for teachers is causing some frustration for some educators.
Obviously, you can't teach what you don't know. Like, you can't expect someone who can't really swim well or is afraid of water, right, to teach people how to swim. And the same goes for something like math.
A conversation is coming up after 7 o'clock. In addition, one Winnipeg man didn't expect his 8-year-old daughter would be the reason that he hit the ice to learn to skate for the first time, but that's what happened. We're going to have a lovely father-daughter duo in talking about ice skating in the next hour of the show, and we'll tell you why.
Today on The Current.
I advise the Governor-General that we need a new session of Parliament.
Parliament is prorogued until March, and that means a lot of bills that were in the works have now died on the books. From clean water for First Nations to a plan to tackle online hate, we'll look at what is at stake coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. The Liberals will have a new leader and Canadians will have a new Prime Minister on March the 9th. The party set the rules for its leader selection process last night, and the timeline is tight. Let's bring in Janice McGregor from our Parliamentary Bureau. Janice, we have more details about how this is all going to go. Take us through them.
John, all the deadlines here are really tight. The vote's going to be on March 9th, but once registered Liberals pick the next Prime Minister, that person, remember, is going to have less than 2 weeks to vet and swear in a cabinet, write a throne speech, and return to a hostile House of Commons that, frankly, by that point, may be only days away from triggering a spring election. So the timeline on the front end of this race has had to be tight, too. Would-be contenders have only 2 weeks to get their paperwork in. Their teams have only until January 27th to get new supporters signed up. And their fundraising also has to be on point. The $350,000 entrance fee makes this the most expensive race to join in Canadian political history.
Janice, the steep entrance fee intended to limit this race to only serious contenders, and someone else declared their intention to enter the race yesterday.
That's right. Before these rules came out, Ottawa area MP Chandra Arya said he was confident he'd be able to raise whatever amount of money they were asking, but he's also very controversial within his own party. His platform includes more controversial policies like recognizing Palestinian statehood. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre carried on with his tactic of using derisive nicknames for his political opponents yesterday. And if you go by that, it appears Conservatives are banking on this race paring down to 3 serious contenders.
In the next election, I will be running against Justin Trudeau. Whether his name is Justin Trudeau, or his name is Chrystia Freeland, or Carbon Tax Carney, or Carbon Tax Clark, they will all be Justin Trudeau.
As Liberals revealed these new rules last night, they also launched a video on social media hyping up this race. We'll see if it generates momentum to start chipping away at the Conservatives' massive lead in the polls.
Janice McGregor in our Parliamentary Bureau. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
To Los Angeles, where more firefighting crews and equipment are joining the battle against the flames. At least 10 people are now confirmed dead. The Palisades fire is only 6% contained. The Eaton fire burning near Pasadena is still out of control. Steve Futterman has more on the destruction.
The number of structures damaged or destroyed continues to rise, and it's staggering, more than 10,000, and it's likely most of them are homes. Gail McMahon returned to her apartment yesterday in Pacific Palisades to see what was left.
It's devastating. I'm homeless. Everything I owned, everything.
On the firefighting front, a tiny bit of progress was made yesterday. With decreased winds, officials focused on attacking the fires from the air with water and retardant. And by last night, they saw some progress. The largest of the fires, the Palisades fire, is now 6% contained. Law enforcement officials are now dealing with another problem, arson. There have been arrests. LA County Sheriff Robert Luna.
Our first choice isn't to do enforcement, but if people choose to commit crimes, they're going to be held accountable.
In the late afternoon, another fire broke out near the San Fernando Valley. Officials believe that may have been the result of arson. A man has been arrested. Meanwhile, for the thousands without homes, they prepare to deal with the rest of their lives.
Mainly it's just the indignity of not having your place, your home, places to go. I lived here because it's a simple, nice town, and it's gone.
Today, the forecast calls for the winds to increase, but only slightly. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Pacific Palisades, California.
TikTok's future in the United States is on the line today. Its parent company is at the U.S. Supreme Court this morning, hoping to overturn an imminent ban. The new law takes effect in just over a week. It outlaws distribution of the popular social media app unless the Chinese company that owns TikTok sells it off. Mike Crawley reports from Washington.
TikTok means being unapologetically authentic.
170 million Americans use TikTok, and the U.S. government believes the app's Chinese ownership poses a grave threat to national security. Because of the risk, it says that China's government could access American users' personal data and could weaponize the app with misinformation. Today's Supreme Court case pits those national security concerns against the U.S. First Amendment right to free speech.
Banning an entire speech platform within the United States is a violation of the Constitution of the highest order.
Kate Ruan is with the Center for Democracy and Technology, a Washington-based nonprofit.
And the government hasn't offered sufficient justification to enact this ban.
In its brief to the court, the U.S. government argues the law is not designed to censor what anyone says on TikTok. Rather, it's designed to stop a foreign adversary from controlling the app. The company that owns TikTok, ByteDance, argues that the law would shut down one of the most significant platforms for free speech in America. Unless the Supreme Court issues an injunction, the ban kicks in 9 days from now. Gus Hurwitz teaches law at the University of Pennsylvania.
I expect that if the court is going to side with TikTok, we will hear very quickly.
The law would prohibit providers like Apple and Google from making the TikTok app available to U.S. users. It would not apply in Canada. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Washington.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is being sworn in for a third term today, but he's widely accused of stealing the most recent election, and that has led to more anti-government protests across the country. Manuel Rueda has the latest.
Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado had been in hiding for the past 4 months. She resurfaced on Thursday and led a protest against Maduro's government. We're entering a new stage in our struggle, she said. The government has its days numbered. Hundreds of people were arrested in Venezuela in August in protests that followed Maduro's re-election. This week, at least 16 politicians and human rights advocates have been arrested in Venezuela, according to the United Nations, in what appears to be an effort to scare the population from joining new protests against Maduro's government. Machado said she was detained as well for about an hour before being released. Venezuela's powerful Interior Minister, Diosdado Cabello, accused her of faking her own arrest. They didn't have so many people in the protests, he said, so they made up something to agitate their supporters. Few countries are expected to send representatives to Maduro's swearing-in ceremony today. The United States and Canada have officially recognized opposition candidate Edmundo González as the winner of July's election. González is currently in exile. On Thursday, he said he would soon return to Venezuela to exercise his presidential duties. But it's not clear how that will happen. Venezuela's military is still firmly behind Maduro. Manuel Rueda, CBC News, Bogotá.
Sudan's deadly civil war is approaching its third year, with tens of thousands killed and millions of others displaced. Many Canadians with family in the African nation are trying to bring their loved ones here. But unlike past federal programs, which have helped hundreds of thousands of Afghans, Syrians, and Ukrainians to flee war, a comparative few Sudanese have made it to Canada. David Common has more.
We have applicants that died because lack of medication, died because they were killed.
Immigration consultant Nagwa Al-Mamoun describes the horror of Sudan's civil war. 150,000 killed, more displaced from their homes by conflict than any other on record, and leading Canada to offer safe haven.
I thank Canada for this initiative, but unfortunately, we expected more.
Compared to other wars, 300,000 Ukrainians were admitted to Canada after Russia's invasion. From Afghanistan, 40,000. From Syria, 25,000. But after nearly a year from Sudan, Canada has approved just 340 Sudanese, and only 55 have actually made it. Ishmael Adam put money down as required by the feds to support his family's escape from Sudan. The Bay Street tech worker can't understand why it's taking so long.
If this is humanitarian and compassionate basis, then do what you did for other nations. Get them here.
McGill University's head of African Studies, Khalid Madani, is willing to say out loud what others in the community whisper.
It's very problematic and it's racist. We have to be clear about the minuscule amount of Sudanese who benefited from this program.
The federal government says it is committed to the non-discriminatory application of immigration procedures, but did not say whether and if more Sudanese will come to Canada. David Common, CBC News, Mississauga, Ontario.
And you can read more about this continuing CBC News series at cbcnews.ca/welcome to Canada. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg. We made it to Friday. Not going to be as mild as yesterday, but not a bad day ahead at all. Just cold. It's January. Let's get into what's coming up this hour on the radio. Well, earlier this week, we heard HSC officials say that on colder nights, the hospital's emergency room, is packed with people who are not there for treatment, but simply there to stay warm. We're going to hear why advocates say this points to a much larger problem in our city. And of course, we're talking about it right now also because of the death of the man in the HSC on Tuesday night. And at that time, they were saying at one point there were 100 people in the ER. And the head at HSC said that likely there were people there that were there to stay warm. Also, this hour on the program, we're going to be talking about the NDP government's changes to the certification requirement for new teachers in Manitoba. It has some educational experts at odds. We have a math professor coming up who says these changes could be detrimental for Manitoba students. And so stay tuned. We're going to have the context of that conversation and have it for you in a moment. Right now, though, let's go to Heather Wells for other headlines.
A Winnipeg woman says she's angry and does not trust the healthcare system after waiting 24 hours for care at the Health Sciences Centre. Rosemarie Figueroa is speaking out after hearing about the man who died waiting in that hospital's ER earlier this week. We're going to hear what happened to her coming up. And the Manitoba First Nations Police Service has named an interim chief following the death of its police chief. Doug Paulson died in a house fire Wednesday morning. You can find more news coming up on our website. Also, our next news locally is coming up at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heath.
You're welcome.
Abby Adiemi's here now with our forecast.
Good morning once again. We're looking at cloudy skies with a chance of light snow in some areas. The wind chill is going to make it feel colder today. However, we're going to be seeing that moment of, sunny breaks and then some cloudy conditions as we get into the day. But the conditions in the northern part of the province is more like extreme wind chills. That's what we're seeing in Churchill. Right now, Winnipeg, -11. We're seeing light snow falling at the airport. Expect cloudy conditions to stay with us. Then that would clear to a mix of sun and clouds later. Light winds will continue throughout the day with temperatures dropping to around -15 by the afternoon. Feeling much colder with the wind chill around -24. In other regions, we're seeing that cold and cloudy day, light snow in most areas down south, temperatures remaining well below freezing, and then the wind chill making it feel colder. But if we look at Churchill, -40, that's what the wind chill feels like in that part of the province. So we're looking more like a cloudy sky, slight chance of snow, and then a mix of sun and clouds. Temperatures will be dropping to -15 in Winnipeg. Right now, it is -11. Just get ready for a chill day with some sunshine this afternoon. And if we check out what's happening in traffic, we have that closure at Burroughs Avenue, Arlington to Sinclair, complete closure due to a fire. So if you're heading towards that area, you might want to use alternative routes and be prepared for some delays if your route is in that area. If you see anything in traffic, let us know. 788-3093.
Well, as I was mentioning, certification requirements for teachers in this province have changed. New early years and middle years teachers will no longer be required to have 6 university-level credit hours in math, science, and languages in order to be certified. So the province has said the changes will remove barriers to help fill teacher shortages. But this decision has some educators and experts at odds. Acting Education Minister Tracy Schmidt was on CBC yesterday afternoon, and she explained the reasons behind the NDP's decision.
I would disagree that we're lowering anything. I think that we are taking a new approach, and I think that this new approach is going to see great people enter the Bachelor of Education. We trust those programs in our province. They graduate excellent teachers, and we should all be really proud of the level of teaching that we have in our province. We don't think that this is going to reduce standards. We don't think this is going to reduce the quality of education in our province. And in fact, it was intended to improve the student experience and to improve those student outcomes.
And she justifies that, Tracy Schmidt, and she has in the past, by pointing to a number of different research articles that actually suggest, though it may sound counterintuitive, that it may not be necessary to have that education at the university level to teach successfully in the classroom and meet those better outcomes. Well, my next guest, Anna Stockey, disagrees. She's a professor in the Department of Mathematics and Science at the University of Winnipeg, and in fact has been part of petitioning the government for many years to look at this in a deeper way. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for being with us. So what are your thoughts about what the acting education minister has just said there?
Yeah, so it's an odd stance to take that they're saying they're not lowering standards when it's categorically false. So there were subject requirements, and now there are 0 subject requirements. So actually it's a fact that they lowered standards. In fact, they have drastically lowered standards. They removed math, science, English, history, and geography requirements for K-8 teachers, and they removed the requirements to have a teachable major and minor.
You have obviously been vocal, as we mentioned, about why you believe that this is harmful to students, as you put it. Can you break down some of what your concerns are?
Oh, sure. So first of all, as I always say, you can't teach what you don't know. It's not fair to teachers or students to put teachers in the classroom who don't understand the math they're teaching or the English they have to teach. And for example, math is really cumulative, and if kids get teachers who don't really know what they're doing, they're going to have trouble in later grades, and it will impact disadvantaged kids the most because they don't have parents that can correct for errors in policy like this.
The changes do mostly apply, from what I understand, to the early years and middle school years teachers. Why, in your view, do these teachers specifically need that 6 university level credit hours in math and science, for example?
Sure. Well, the reason that they need those core requirements, and those have been in place since the 90s, by the way, so this is a really dramatic change. The reason they need those requirements is because K-8 teachers tend to be generalists. They have to teach all the subjects, and so that's why they were required to take those core subjects. But it actually doesn't just affect the K-8 teachers. They've also removed the teachable major and minor requirements for all teachers. In the past, teachers had to have a major in a subject that's taught in school, right? So math or English or history or something like that. And now that's no longer a requirement. So it actually affects us from K-12.
You helped to successfully petition in Manitoba in 2015 to raise the math requirements for teacher certification. How do you feel now to see the province, stepping back in, I guess would be the language that you might use in this way?
Well, it's alarming. I mean, it's in fact, and I've been advocating for around 15 years for better standards for education in the province. And this is the most extreme, wrong-headed thing I've ever seen. I mean, no other province is doing this, and it puts us behind all other provinces in Canada, when in fact we tend to have the lowest scores in Canada. So it just doesn't really make any sense.
What, in your opinion, obviously part of this has been to combat the teacher shortage. So what, in your opinion, might be another method to combat the teacher shortage, if not to change some of the requirements to get more people into the education programs?
Sure. And I've talked to a lot of teachers about that. And I mean, I don't teach in school, but what I'm understanding is that a lot of teachers are leaving the profession or deciding not to enter the profession because of working conditions. It's not because they have to take math or English as part of their degree. They have a lot of students with complex needs, a lot of struggling students. They're dealing with extreme behaviors and classes full of students that are many grades behind. So it's the working conditions that are making it an undesirable job. But in any case, the government, it's their responsibility to find better ways to deal with teacher shortages and retention issues that don't lower standards, because lowering standards is going to make things worse.
Manitoba student scores, as you alluded to, and there's data to support this, of course, said that Manitoba student scores don't fare well in comparison to other provinces. Across the country, math scores are low in all provinces, in fairness, but we do score lower in math. We have had challenges with those provincial standards in math for many years, decades, in fact. Do you think there's a direct correlation? Does your concern directly correlate to the fact that we're already not doing well there, so why would you cut math?
Yes, that definitely is one of my concerns, right? I mean, a teacher who doesn't know how to add fractions, and we do see students at the university level who come in and don't know basic math. And to just think that we can throw them out into the schools and that this is going to work out and that they're going to be able to teach students basic math, I mean, it just defies all logic, right? So, yes, that is a concern. I also think it's going to devalue the education degree. We do have a lot of great teachers in the system, and they've all jumped through those hoops that you do when you are in a profession, right? And now they've removed all that, so it devalues the degree.
The math exams, English is being written this week at the high school level, the standardized provincial testing, which is back since 2019. Math will be written later this month. Obviously, you're a math professor. What do you think, just looking at that specifically, we could do to improve scores at the high school level on the standardized testing?
Well, the main thing is to make sure that students get a good foundation in the lower years because math is really cumulative. So it's really important that they master basic arithmetic. They need to know their times tables so that they can do more complex math because it's very cumulative. And if you get behind early on, it just kind of snowballs. So I think just having, good instruction in the classroom using sort of an explicit approach, explaining to students why things are true and getting lots of practice is really the key to that.
What would you say to the province at this stage? Obviously, you've been petitioning. You have had meetings with the province, which I understand you felt have been unsuccessful. So
right.
I guess I would ask, why have they been unsuccessful in your view, and what would you say to the province as you continue to be concerned about this?
Yeah, so the province, in my opinion, has been dismissive. They don't seem to even understand that teachers actually need to know the subjects they have to teach. And you mentioned research at the beginning, and they were saying that this was backed by research. We wrote a 45-page report debunking this research. Of course, you need to know math to be able to teach math, and anybody that tells you otherwise, you need to ask for evidence and then check it. We did, and it doesn't support that. So the province really, they need to reverse this. It is a serious mistake that they have made. I believe they were misled by the advice they were given, that they were under the impression that research showed this. They were under the impression that it aligns us with other provinces. It does not. And they really need to reverse this.
I apologize for not knowing this while we're on air here, and this is something I will certainly look up when we're off air, but I don't know whether or not these changes, if we know yet, if they've effectively had the intent, achieve the intention the province had when putting it out, which is, are there more people that are going to be enrolling in Bachelor of Education? But obviously, I guess that date is coming later this year because of when they made the announcement. So we'll have to see if that happens.
That's right. Yeah, we don't know that yet, and that's another thing. There's no proof that this is actually going to improve the problem, that it's the right fix. But in any case, they need to find a fix that doesn't dramatically lower standards.
Anna Stocky, thank you for your time this morning.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Anna Stocky's been with us, professor in the Department of Mathematics and Science at the University of Winnipeg. The acting education minister was on Up to Speed on CBC yesterday. You can find that interview online. You can also obviously read more about the story at cbc.ca/Manitoba, and that is because we've been doing ongoing coverage of this for a number of years now, and that goes back to when Anna Stocky and her colleagues were first petitioning as well the province to make some changes. If you're a teacher specifically listening, you can weigh in no matter who you are, but I would really love to hear from teachers on this morning. 788-3205.
The cold of winter melted by an array of floral artistry to warm your soul. Fleur de Ville Artiste comes to the Leaf at Assiniboine Park January 16th to 26th. Be dazzled by figurines decorated in flowery fashions, designed by Manitoba's vibrant art scene and blossoming floral talent. Fleur de Ville Artiste, proudly sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
Be an Iron Man and curl. No, not your hair. This is curling on the frozen ice of the Assiniboine River. Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel is back February 7th to 9th. Form a team, Embrace the winter with one hand, a rock with the other, and join the Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel, sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
I love that line. No, not your hair. It's -12 right now. Light snow falling in Winnipeg. A couple things quick to mention with traffic. Arlington to Sinclair. This is Burroughs Avenue from Arlington to Sinclair. There's a complete closure there due to fire this morning. Use alternate routes. Also, Abby's been correctly pointing out to watch for plows out there and just watch for equipment that might be out on the highway taking care of things, especially if you're in a yield. They can't see you often. That was one of my scariest moments on the road ever. Someone couldn't see me, and I was backing up as they were backing up, and I was trying to beat them. But you have to be very mindful around that equipment. All right, let's get to other business here. 7:25, morning sports time with Scott Regehr, who joins us. Good morning.
Hey there, Marcy.
So we're starting with the wildfires, just unbelievable in LA. And they are continuing, obviously, to have an impact on sporting events in the sports world as well.
Yeah, they are. On Wednesday, we had that NHL game between Calgary and the LA Kings postponed because of the fires. Last night, the same thing happened with an NBA game between the Lakers and Charlotte. And now, Marcy, we're learning the playoff contest Monday between the LA Rams and the Minnesota Vikings. It's being moved out of town. The NFL made that decision last night, just a few hours after yet another fire broke out, only a few miles from the Rams' training facility. Monday's wildcard matchup then is going to be played in Phoenix, where Rams coach Sean McVay says he hopes it can offer Los Angelinos a bit of levity.
What sports represents is an opportunity for people to come together, provide a temporary sense of relief from some of the things that they're going through. And I am excited about the opportunity for our team to go compete where people can be proud and have a team that I think, represents a lot of the things that are right about sports. And I know we're going to prepare to the best of our ability to do that.
This isn't the first time the NFL has moved a Monday night game from Southern California because of wildfires. A matchup between the San Diego Chargers and the Miami Dolphins had to be shifted to Arizona back in 2003.
Let's go to another story closer to home, where one of Canada's best ever speed skaters is back in the news.
Yeah, that's two-time Olympic champion Katrina Lemay-Doan. She has just been elected chair of the Canada Games Council. A Saskatchewan native, Lemay-Doan attended her first games as a 12-year-old athlete in Quebec, and she says she was struck by the vastness of the competition, the many sports that were being played. Lemay-Doan tells CBC, Marcy, in her new role, she wants to raise awareness about the importance of these games.
For me, so many people have been involved in the Canada Games, and yet there's still some Canadians who don't know about the Canada Games. They truly touch and have the ability to touch every Canadian. I want every Canadian to know about that. So how do we tell the story to all Canadians about the power that the Canada Games has had, not just in the sporting world, but in our community?
Yeah, countrywide communities, Marcy, have been affected by getting to see sports stars of the future as they were just getting going. I think of hockey's Marie-Philippe Poulin, Sidney Crosby, Olympic gold medalists in gymnastics and athletics like Kyle Schufelt and Andre DeGrasse, and several Winnipeggers, Caitlin Laws, the curler, Kelsey Wog, the swimmer, Desiree Scott in soccer. They all played at the Canada Games at one point in time. And of course, it's not just the athletes that leave a legacy. There's infrastructure as well. I was just out at a function at my alma mater, Brock University in St. Catharines, Ontario. Right near the campus is Canada Games Park. It's a state-of-the-art facility, a hockey rink, a running track, beach volleyball setup, among other things. And I saw countless, not just kids, but retirees using the place. And it was really cool to see, especially at a time when so many people are dropping out of sports. So Katrina Lemay-Doan, she's well acquainted with this issue, and you can find our whole interview up with her up on our website this morning.
And a busy sports weekend ahead, including the Jets, who are back in action tonight.
Yeah, they'll be hosting the LA Kings. Can't imagine how some of those players are feeling right now being away from home with all that's going on in LA with the fires. As for the Jets, though, reinforcements. Josh Morrissey, the great defender, he had to leave the previous game after falling into the goalpost. He appears good to go tonight, though. And Dylan Sandberg, he's been missing since November with a broken foot. He'll also be returning to the lineup. So puck drop for the Jets and the Kings, 7 o'clock tonight.
All right, thanks a lot, Scott. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Traffic update here. Burroughs Avenue, fully open again now. Fire crews are actually even off scene. So you're smooth going through there. Coming up, we're going to remain on the ice and have a great sports story still ahead. A Winnipeg man says he didn't expect that his 8-year-old daughter would be the reason that he hit the ice for the first time and started skating and hopes to coach one day. But that's exactly what happened. And his daughter is going to have a special honor at the Jets game this weekend at Filipino Heritage Night. So we'll find all about this story after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 7:30. That temperature's already started to slide. It's minus 12 right now in Winnipeg. We'll keep falling to minus 15 this afternoon with a mix of sun and clouds and then periods of snow beginning overnight. A Winnipeg woman who trained as a doctor in the Philippines is shocked by the state of Manitoba's healthcare system. Rosemary Figueroa is speaking out after hearing about the man who died while waiting in the emergency department at Health Sciences Center earlier this week. She waited 24 hours at that hospital in November without being seen by a doctor. Figueroa says she went to the ER over concerns her cough and difficulty breathing were symptoms of a pulmonary embolism, which can be fatal. She says the experience has left her not trusting the health system.
I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm disappointed, and scared at the same time because we don't want to go to the emergency anymore, right? Because we're very, very sure that we will not be treated fairly.
Figueroa says a doctor at Seven Oaks was eventually able to help her after she left HSC. She says they concluded she likely had a pulmonary embolism. If Donald Trump is joking about U.S. annexing Canada, Cindy Woodhouse-Nebenak is not laughing. The national chief of the Assembly of First Nations, a member of Pinnimutang First Nation in Manitoba's Interlake, rejects the president-elect's recent statements about Canada. Woodhouse-Nebenak says Trump's remarks about using economic coercion to force Canada to join the U.S. are disrespectful to all Indigenous peoples and their ancestral lands.
It's disheartening and alarming, and, First Nations, we've stood up against colonialism before, and we'll continue to do so. When you're going to come and talk about our lands or our resources, there's First Peoples on both sides of the border that he has to make sure he speaks to. He can't just unilaterally push his weight around.
Woodhouse-Nebenak says the Assembly plans to reach out to Trump once he takes power later this month. The Liberal Party of Canada has set the rules for its leadership race. Candidates have until January 23rd to declare. They will need to put up $350,000 for the entrance fee. Prospective members have until the 27th to join, and they will need to be a citizen or permanent resident of Canada or have status under the Indian Act. The new leader will be announced March 9th. The death toll in the Los Angeles wildfires has climbed to 10. LAPD say they believe one of the blazes, the Kenneth Fire, was started deliberately. They have a suspect in custody. And the National Guard has been deployed amid reports of looting. LA Police Chief Jim McDonnell says their focus now is on preventing crime.
Protecting homes and businesses in the evacuated and vulnerable zones is our priority, ensuring no one takes advantage of a difficult situation. There will be zero tolerance for looting. Looting or exploiting this disaster will not be tolerated. Individuals caught looting or committing crimes in affected areas will be arrested and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
At least 180,000 people have been forced out of the affected areas. More than 10,000 homes, businesses, and other structures have been consumed by flames. Losses so far are estimated $150 billion U.S. You can hear the latest national and international news on World Report at 8. The mother of a man stabbed to death outside an Arlington Street beer vendor says her heart aches all the time. That from a victim impact statement from Doris Corshane, whose son Enrique George Corshane died in 2022. A dozen of his family members were in court yesterday for the sentencing hearing. 39-year-old Cecil Vance Roulette was found guilty of manslaughter in November. Court heard Corshane and his brother were at a beer vendor at Arlington and Logan, where they met up with 3 other men. Surveillance shows at first they were laughing and shaking hands, but once outside, the men attacked Corshane Corsane's brother. That's when Corsane jumped in and wrestled Roulette to the ground. The Crown says Roulette stabbed him multiple times. It is asking for a sentence of 13 years, less time served. The Manitoba First Nations Police Service has named an interim chief following the death of its police chief. Doug Paulson died in a house fire Wednesday morning. Inspector Jason Cullen will step into the chief's role for the foreseeable future. Paulson is being remembered as a dedicated leader and trailblazer in First Nations policing. And a researcher from the University of Manitoba is part of an international team of scientists who have drilled what is believed to be the world's longest continuous record of ice at a remote site in Antarctica. The 2,800-meter ice core is expected to reveal the Earth's historical climate patterns going back more than 1.2 million years. John Higgins is a member of the U.S. National Science Foundation Center for Oldest Ice Research and Exploration.
Protecting homes and businesses in the evacuated and vulnerable zones is our priority, ensuring no one takes advantage of it.
Ice cores give us really a unique record of Earth's past in that they trap little bits of essentially ancient atmosphere. And so they're really the closest you can get to going back in a time machine and being able to measure what the atmosphere was like in the past.
The research project involved collaboration between scientific and logistical teams from across Europe. You can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you very much, Heather Walls. It is 7:36 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app and YouTube this morning. Let's get into what's happening in our weather forecast and traffic. Abby's covering both this morning. What's up?
Yeah, we expecting the temperatures to fall to minus 15, and it's already sliding. We're seeing in most of the regions down south temperatures around minus 12 at this time. Though it's a chilly stat and temperatures well below that freezing point. We should see that slight chance of snow in some areas, and wind chill will make it feel even colder. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at minus 12. Light snow falling at the airport. Expect cloudy skies this morning with, a bit of snow here and there, and then that should clear as we get into the afternoon. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds. That light winds will continue, and temperatures will be dropping to around minus 15 by the afternoon period. With the wind chill, it actually feels like minus 24 this morning. So if you're making transition from one bus to another, you should be preparing for that. And then tonight in Winnipeg, we will see more cloudy conditions with periods of snow starting near midnight. In other regions down south, temperatures around minus 12 as mentioned. Cloudy conditions, light snow in the forecast. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds in most of the regions, and still chilly temperatures feeling like minus 25. But in the Interlake region today, we're seeing wind chill close to minus 30. Up north, we're already seeing temperatures hover around minus 27 in Thompson and Churchill. And that part of the province will be experiencing extreme cold with the wind chills near minus 40 in Churchill. So in summary, today in Winnipeg, we're looking at cloudy conditions, slight chance of light snow this morning. Then a mix of sun and clouds. Temperatures will be dropping to around minus 15 in Winnipeg. So as mentioned earlier, Marcy, just get ready for a chilly day with some sunshine to patch things up, but it's not really going to be warm.
What do you know about the drive, the commute this morning?
As the Burroughs Avenue condition is now open, the fire crews are gone, so you can now have a good commute along that axis. And if you're on the highway outside, if you're on the perimeter axis, look out for the plows. They're clearing the snow on the highways at this point. You see anything? Let us know. 788-3093.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Well, for those folks that watch our show on YouTube, you're going to see that I made a wardrobe change, and that's because I figured I better show some support for the home team, and that is the Winnipeg Jets. And why not? Because my next two guests are all geared up in their Jets gear as well. The Winnipeg Jets are hosting their third annual Filipino Heritage Night on Saturday, and some lucky kids are going to get to hit the big ice tomorrow at Canada Life Centre as part of their pregame and intermission entertainment. So children who have been newcomers and were part of a first shift learn to skate program are going to be showcasing their new skills. That includes a graduate of the program who's in studio, 8-year-old Alex Puache. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
I love your jersey. It's cool.
Thank you.
She's got the blue one on, by the way. I'm wearing white. Her dad's also wearing a blue jersey. Sunny Puwache is in studio as well. Good morning.
And good morning, Marcy.
So what was it like, Alex, during the first time that you got on skates? Do you remember?
I was scared.
Okay.
It was hard to ice skate. I was holding onto the wall. I couldn't move. It was hard for me, but my friends, luckily, they were there and they helped me learn how to ice skate on the first day.
That's amazing.
And
now you really like it, I heard.
yeah, I do.
Yeah. You even joined a team, maybe?
Yeah, Garden City Rangers.
That's cool. What do you play on the team? Do you have a position, or is it is it
Forward.
a forward? Okay. Cool. You at first, when you played on the team, felt some stress, I heard, when you went to the first game, right?
Yeah, I'm the only girl on the team, so I'm scared. I feel like the boys, they're just faster, they're stronger.
What made you stick with it?
They started to talk to me, and I started feeling comfortable with them.
I love that. Totally awesome. Now, not only that, but your dad is here because you have been inspiring your dad, I heard.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. So I kind of want to keep talking to you, but we better get Dad in here. So, Sunny, I want to back up a second. What did you think at first when you were watching your daughter get into, ice skating and part of this program?
Well, of course, I'm proud. She's amazing, but I can't deny it. I was really scared. Up until now, I'm scared every time that she goes on ice. Yeah, because it's a sport that it's new to us.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sport that somehow there's some physicality in it. So, and I don't really understand the game at first.
Yeah. So was your fear that around the hitting or around the actual ice and falling? What were your fears about? What were you scared about?
Well, from the start, it was just falling and yeah, and hopefully she would not fall down hard. But when she joined the team now, it's more on other players, especially boys around. So they're starting to hit each other.
Yeah. So it's a physical game. Yeah, there's lots to navigate there.
Yeah.
What did it feel like for you when she joined the team, and then that moment where she was thinking of, as she said, thinking of maybe quitting?
Yeah, it was hard on the first day, especially for a dad, for a parent. Mid through the first session, she quit actually. So she cried on ice and she wanted to get out. So yeah, we just went for an ice cream, and then I just told her about some stories about not quitting in my life as well. And yeah, we'll just take ice skating and especially ice hockey one day at a time.
I love that. I love that you went back. So awesome. One time I enrolled in an exercise class, and I sat after the first one, I sat there and I cried. I just cried, and I got in the car and I kept crying, and I thought I'm never going back. And then I also had a really good friend who got me back to go back, and it felt so good going back. What did you feel like when you went back to the team?
I was still a little scared.
Of course. Yeah. What does it feel like now when you play? Why do you love hockey?
My family, they encourage me. They're proud of me. And my teammates, they're nice. They talk to me.
Yeah. So Sunny, we already heard that you were inspired yourself a little bit. So can you tell us about that? How's your daughter inspired you?
Well, I'm taking on new things, especially if we're a little bit older, right? It's hard to start new things. Yeah, especially if it's physical. But of course, when I see Alex goes on ice every time, wow, it's amazing. So we have this. I found a program. It's open for adults to learn how to skate. It's with an organization, a Filipino organization, association, that's starting this Learn How to Skate for Adults.
Have you enrolled?
Yes, and officially I'll start by the end of this month, January 25th.
How are you feeling about it?
Scared. I think I need to, it's just learn how to skate, but I think I'm going to gear up as well so that if I fall, yeah.
Absolutely. How do you feel about your dad doing this?
proud of him.
Yeah, right on. It's so cool. So I heard that you even have a longer term goal now that involves your family with this whole you learning to skate, Sonny, right?
Yeah, because it was especially here in Winnipeg, in Manitoba, it's hard to find activities, family activities, of course, with schedules and financials. So especially during winter, right? So at least when the whole family learns how to skate, at least we have something family activity during winter.
So the whole family includes you have a little tiny brother, I heard.
Yeah, he's 1 year old.
1 year old. Do you hope that maybe he'll be involved in hockey in the future too somehow?
Yeah, maybe. I think we have a program as well, learn how to skate for starting at 3 years old. So yeah, at least he would start early, right?
Yeah, maybe you'll be coaching him by the time he gets older.
Yeah, and that's one of my goal because Alexandra is really she's hoping that I'll be coaching one day.
I love all of this. This is such a beautiful family story. You guys are so, and you're brave, right, to do this. Such a good story. It's inspiring for all of us. So let's talk about this big moment. So tomorrow night, you're going to be skating at on the big ice over at the Jets game?
Yeah.
What do you think that's going to be like?
I feel like it's going to be kind of like one of those just free ice skate. Like, just ice skate, have fun. But I'm also still scared because I haven't really done this.
Yeah. And so you how are you preparing for being, to feel good tomorrow? Are you going to kind of have your family in the crowd maybe and maybe able to look up and wave at them or something?
I'm just remembering that at least some of my teammates will be there, hopefully.
Yeah. You won't be alone. Yeah. Well, now everyone listening to you on the radio this morning is going to be cheering for you. So you'll have to make sure you give a little wave for all those folks that are going to be in the crowd that have heard you on the radio.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you so much for being here. Good luck with your team. How's your team doing this year?
Good.
Yeah? Have you had some wins?
Yeah.
Yeah? Have you ever scored a goal?
No.
No?
In the game, no.
No? Okay, me neither. I can't skate backwards, and I sometimes have dreams about having to be in a game, and I'm really nervous, and I wake up and go, okay, it's okay. So I love that you're on a team. Nice to meet you.
You too.
And good luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you so much, Sonny, for being in here. Good luck with learning to skate. We'll have to follow your story through if you're so willing.
More pressure here.
Sonny has been in studio with his 8-year-old daughter, Alex Puache, the Puache family. The third annual Jets Filipino Heritage Night is tomorrow night. It starts at 6 o'clock, and Alex is going to be one of the young people who's going to be part of the skating that is going to be celebrated on the big ice.
Hi, I'm Saroja Coelho, host of the Saturday afternoon call-in show Just Asking, now expanding to 2 hours.
And I'm Ian Hannamansing, host of the Sunday afternoon call-in show Cross Country Checkup.
Whether it's world events
or what's happening in your backyard,
every weekend we connect Canada live.
That's Just Asking with Saroja Coelho, Saturday afternoons at 4 Eastern.
And Cross Country Checkup with Ian Hannamansing, Sunday afternoons at 4 Eastern on CBC Radio 1.
When you have to leave everything behind,
you're just trying to find a way to stay here for a better life.
What are the real costs of making a new start?
I have faced so many hardships financially, emotionally, and physically.
A CBC News series looks at what it's really like for newcomers.
I am losing hope.
Welcome to Canada, the immigrant experience.
Prepare yourself because coming here is not that easy.
Everywhere you get CBC News.
Sorry about that, listeners. I was just speaking over. I think perhaps I got caught talking there off mic, and if I didn't, then I didn't. Just saying goodbye to our guests, of course, this morning who've been in studio. So lovely. It's 11 minutes now to 8 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. It's -12 in Winnipeg. There's light snow falling. And so I want to tell you that coming up after 8 o'clock on the program, we're going to build on something you may have heard in the news. Donald Trump, the president-elect, has threatened to make Canada the 51st state. We're going to hear from a First Nations leader who says that these comments, quote, undermine the sovereignty of Indigenous peoples whose inherent rights to these lands long predate both nations. And so we'll have that conversation coming up after 8 o'clock right here on the show. First, though, right now, there were about 100 people in the Health Sciences Center's ER on Tuesday. That was the morning that a middle-aged man died while waiting for care. And while that's more than usual, HSC officials say it's not uncommon for the waiting room to get crowded, especially on chilly days. That is because when the temperatures drop, some unhoused Winnipeggers turn to emergency rooms as an escape from the cold. Marion Willis is with St. Boniface Street Links. Now, she shared with CBC this week that she feels that this points to a larger problem.
Hospitals have been expected to provide a service that normally is provided by shelter services, and that's not fair. It kind of puts hospitals in a very challenging set of circumstances. There's very few options for people. Your only option, if you're not housed, is to make your way to Main Street Project, to 190 Disraeli, to Salvation Army, to these places where there's very large numbers of people at those shelters. They're often very chaotic. People consider them unsafe. I don't know whether they're safe or they're unsafe, but they tell us that they feel unsafe. So when, just like anybody else, everybody seeks safety. Safety is a primary sort of first human need, basic need to be met. And so you go where you can find that. And for a lot of people during the winter, it's waiting rooms in Winnipeg Hospital.
So Winnipegger Al Weave has experienced homelessness. It's been 13 years, though, since he lived on the streets. But he advocates for others who are struggling the same that he once did. And he is still currently doing that and very much in touch with the population. And we have him with us next. Good morning, Al.
Good morning.
So this idea of people who are houseless looking to emergency rooms on cold days, is this something that's been going on for years in Winnipeg, in your view?
Yeah. The one problem is, and I was asked yesterday, are there enough warming shelters? Well, yes, there are, but not enough 24/7 warming shelters, and that's the big problem. We have Magnus Eliasson over on Langside, and we have Marion on St. Mary's that has extended hours, and there are one or two other 24/7. But Shalom has during really cold weather they have an emergency pop-up shelter, but very, very few 24/7. And where are people supposed to go?
I'm wondering whether or not, it may be premature to ask this question, but you were in studio actually last month because of the closure of, the library services. Right. Now, that wouldn't have been the Library Resource Center for people what a lot of unhoused people may have used. That wouldn't have been 24/7 either.
No, not at all.
But we were talking about the downtown geographic, though downtown HSC kind of into the West End.
There was nothing there.
So there's shelter-wise in this core area, there's nothing?
There's 20 Magnus Eliasson on Langside, which is close to Portage Avenue, is a 24/7 drop-in. And there are others like West Central Women's Resource Center, but they're not 24/7. They are there during business hours type of thing. And where are people supposed to go? One thing that bothered me about this was a comment by the spokesperson at the hospital saying overcrowding was the problem. I don't think so. The problem is they didn't do their job in this case of diagnosing that person's triage.
So speaking to the person that died on Tuesday, you don't believe that overcrowding should be highlighted as an issue?
No, and also during the Sinclair probe, Sinclair investigation report, one of the things that was recommended, they started looking at it, but then they backed off on it, was to have a liaison or somebody, a social worker or somebody in the emergency rooms to just talk to people, right? And just see how things are going with them, how you're feeling and all that kind of thing.
To check in.
You check in and, also, sometimes because after 15 hours, people tend to get really agitated. But as we see, people get left behind and get unnoticed. And how after 8 hours, how does a person die?
We're going to a lot of those questions. The Premier was here yesterday, and we were asking what questions he would like to see answered in the investigation into this. And that monitoring piece that you're quite right was supposed to be happening consistently is one of the things we raised. Is that happening?
But it was dismissed, I guess.
Or not. I guess we'll find out.
We'll find out, yeah.
But it's a critical question. I'm not sure if you have firsthand experience in understanding what it's like to be in an emergency room or go to a hospital for warmth when you're unhoused and what that's like to be that person.
I actually did that when I was out there because I was sleeping in a car in the junkyard in the back lane, and I needed heat once in a while. I did actually do that, but I was one of those that was smart enough to not overstay my welcome, and stay for 2 or 3 hours and then leave. And before, and don't go to triage, right? Just walk in and hopefully you get by the security guard and don't have to go to triage. But many times I would go to triage, and then before my number came up, I would leave. Right, and this happens over and over again.
And you would have sought shelter there. Why? Does that refer back to what you said at the beginning? There was just not enough 24/7 safe spaces?
Well, not for me. I was 2 blocks down on McPhillips and William, so this is my closest spot. I never used any of the services per se. I was too proud to do that. But that was just for in the wintertime. It was a really cold winter. We had minus 68 wind chills during the winter 2010. I just used it for a warm space. But again, there's a perception about people who are homeless or look homeless. And when I went to get help because I was suicidal after 14 and a half months, I had no hope left. I was rejected 3 times in a row. I spent total of 60 hours in the emergency room at HSC and was rejected 3 times in a row, leading to a jump off the bridge simply because they did not diagnose me properly.
Rejected meaning what? They refused you care?
I was seen by a psych nurse who just did not take my story seriously. And again, I shouldn't be here today.
Why would someone go to an ER, just to widen this into that, instead of a shelter, despite the fact of the 24 hours? Why would they not choose Salvation Army, Salome Mission? Should they be able to make their way there?
A lot of people are afraid of shelters. That's one thing. And shelters are, if you don't live in a shelter, you don't have access to the shelter. And during the really cold spells, Salvation Army will open their lobby and things like this, but only for short periods of time. You cannot stay there. And I think that's, again, it goes back to not having enough 24/7 shelters or warming spaces. And for a while there, the city opened up, other places, but they have not done that this year.
Dr. Sean Young, who's the CEO of Health Sciences Center, said at a news conference this week that the ER was being used, I'm just going to repeat this, by unhoused Winnipeggers to keep warm on this day on Tuesday. I'm wondering, though, I'm repeating it because I wonder, the question is, what do you make of that being shared with the public?
I think it's a negative, and again, it casts it's a disparaging remark about the homeless folks. But again,
if it's a fact, why could it be seen as a negative? Like, what concerns you about it?
Folks experiencing homelessness are always seen as a negative on society, and this is why I have to fight so hard for it. But also, it can be a good thing to bring awareness, to the issue that maybe we just simply don't have enough housing for folks. And for me, the end result is permanent housing. Right? It's not shelter space. I think we need to revamp policies at shelter space to allow folks in for longer periods of time. It just doesn't happen. Other than Shalom, who does an excellent job of, they have a pop-up now and they create an extra 200 spaces, something like that, right?
Thank you very much, Al, for being here. I know the Premier also said next week he's going to make more announcements about, he alluded to, wouldn't give us details on wraparound services, housing. So we'll see if
that's easier said than done.
Yes.
I'm interested to see what he has to say.
We certainly all are. Yeah. And you and I will talk again
for sure.
And with community once we do know what the plans are. Such a tragic story all the way around.
It is.
Thank you very much for being here.
And thank you for having me on.
That's Al Weeb in studio live, an advocate for people experiencing homelessness in our community. In fact, he has a conference every spring to look at the issues through a Winnipeg lens. Let's get to what's happening in our news center this morning with headlines.
Good morning. Well, the head of the Assembly of First Nations is flatly rejecting Donald Trump's recent musings about annexing Canada. National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanek says the U.S. President-elect's comments are disrespectful to all Indigenous people and their ancestral lands. Shattering expectations, the latest jobs numbers are just out moments ago. Stats Canada says this country added 91,000 jobs in December. Manitoba was the only province where employment dropped. This province, the jobless rate rose last month. now at 6.2%. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 8:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Interestingly, in the business news this morning, Manitoba also was going against a trend where our rents went up as well in the latest data, where they went down across the country. So a couple things to dig into there today. Minus 12 right now. Our temperature is falling to minus 15. Stay with us. More to come. World Report is next.
Today on Q.
Many of the actors and technicians he's worked with have also fled, fearing for their lives.
The Iranian filmmaker Mohammad Razalov risked everything to make his new political thriller, which he shot entirely in secret. He explains how the idea for the story was inspired by his experience in prison and why the critical success of the film has been bittersweet.
Q with Tom Power. This morning at 10, 10:30 in Newfoundland. And on demand on CBC Listen. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Parliament is prorogued until March, and that means a lot of bills that were in the works have now died on the books. From clean water for First Nations to a plan to tackle online hate, we'll look at what is at stake coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. We begin with the latest job numbers from Statistics Canada, and they're pointing to some promising gains in the month of December. CBC's senior business correspondent Peter Armstrong has had a look at that report and joins me in studio. So, Peter, some good news.
A pleasant little surprise for Friday morning. 91,000 jobs added, which is considerably more than economists had been expecting. And these are mostly full-time private sector jobs. We've seen the employment rate rise for the first time since January of 2023. The unemployment rate ticked down to 6.7. Remember, it had been sitting at its highest rate we'd seen in years. Wage growth is still ticking along, but it too is moderating. There's a ton of good news in this.
Okay, though. New U.S. president set to take office. Threat of tariffs, not to be a buzzkill, but what do you read into that?
Look, there's a lot at stake, and if you can get a little cushion around the main economic indicators, you'll certainly take it. There's a really interesting tidbit in this report. It says 8.8%, or about 1.8 million people, work in industries where 35% or more of jobs in those industries depended on U.S. demand for Canadian exports. It's a really good reminder as we head into that week and a half now until the inauguration of Donald Trump, of just what's at stake, how important the U.S. economy is to the Canadian economy, and again, just how important it is to have a little bit of cushion as we head into the threat of tariffs and whatever else may come.
Senior business correspondent Peter Armstrong in studio. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Canadians will know who their next prime minister is on March 9th, and whoever it is will need to raise a lot of money. The Liberals' National Board decided last night the cost to enter the race will be higher than ever before, and who can vote for the next Liberal leader is also changing. Kate McKenna has details.
In 2 months, the Liberal Party will have a new leader and Canada will have a new prime minister. The party announced the leadership race rules on Thursday night, days after Justin Trudeau said he will resign when a new leader is chosen. According to the Liberal Party, candidates need to enter the race by January 23rd, 2 weeks from now. And the cost of entry is $350,000. It's the highest entry fee in Canadian history and could result in a smaller group of candidates. As well, the Liberals are tightening up their membership rules. Before, potential voters only had to have a Canadian address. Now they must be citizens or permanent residents. And the party set a registration cutoff date for new members. It's January 27th. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Current Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is making his case against the new U.S. tariffs to the American public. While he was in Washington for Jimmy Carter's funeral yesterday, he did 2 interviews on major U.S. networks. Richard Madden is on this story for us in our Washington bureau. So, Richard, what message is Trudeau delivering to Americans?
Yeah, he appeared on both CNN and MSNBC. Prime Minister Trudeau said all this talk of Canada becoming the 51st state is a distraction from the much bigger issue on how the incoming president's proposed 25% tariffs on Canadian imports will impact prices on Americans, from electricity to lumber, concrete and produce.
If he does choose to go forward with tariffs that raise the cost of just about everything for American citizens, that on top of that, we're going to have a robust response to that.
And that response, Trudeau said, is Ottawa's compiling a list of its own counter tariffs on American-made imports if Trump follows through. Trudeau also denied Trump's re-election factored into his resignation.
So, Richard, how did Trump respond?
Yeah, Trump justified his plan to impose these tariffs, pointing to the U.S. trade deficit with Canada. Trump says the U.S. has enough of its own resources and products.
We don't need anything. We don't need their fuel. We don't need their energy. We don't need their oil and gas. We don't need anything that they have.
So all this puts into question the fate of the modernized NAFTA or USMCA agreement that Trump brokered in his first term. That deal is up for renewal next year, so Trump appears to be signaling it may be in jeopardy.
Richard Madden in Washington. Thanks, Richard.
You bet.
A stark warning this morning on climate change. It's pushing the planet's temperature to levels never before experienced by modern humans. That's according to new data from global climate monitoring agencies. The CBC's international climate correspondent, Susan Ormiston, has more.
Confirmed, 2024 was the hottest year on record, exceeding even 2023, which the globe sweltered through.
And the last 10 years have been the 10 warmest years on record.
Samantha Burgess at the European Weather Forecast Centre says this year is expected to follow that trend.
From examining how the climate has changed over several decades, it is clear we are now living in a very different climate from that which our parents and our grandparents experienced.
The 6 top global climate monitoring agencies are reporting today together to drive home their message. Greenhouse gas levels in the atmosphere are still at record highs, and Copernicus reports global temperatures did rise above the important marker of 1.5 degrees of warming for a full calendar year.
The reality is that at that global average change of 1.5 degrees, extreme events like wildfires, heat waves, severe storms, they're likely to get more frequent and they're likely to be more intense.
LA's unprecedented firestorm this week was made more destructive because of cumulative warming and a near-record dry spell over the past 6 months. Damage costs from those fires have now risen above $50 billion. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Toronto.
Meanwhile, more firefighting crews and equipment are joining the battle against the flames in the Los Angeles area. At least 10 people are now confirmed dead. The Palisades fire only 6% contained. The Eaton fire burning near Pasadena is still out of control. Steve Futterman has more on the destruction.
The number of structures damaged or destroyed continues to rise, and it's staggering, more than 10,000, and it's likely most of them are homes. Gail McMahon returned to her apartment yesterday in Pacific Palisades to see what was left.
It's devastating. I'm homeless. I had everything I owned, everything.
On the firefighting front, a tiny bit of progress was made yesterday. With decreased winds, officials focused on attacking the fires from the air with water and retardant. And by last night, they saw some progress. The largest of the fires, the Palisades fire, is now 6% contained. Law enforcement officials are now dealing with another problem, arson. There have been arrests. LA County Sheriff Robert Luna.
Our first choice isn't to do enforcement, but if people choose to commit crimes, they're going to be held accountable.
In the late afternoon, another fire broke out near the San Fernando Valley. Officials believe that may have been the result of arson. A man has been arrested. Meanwhile, for the thousands without homes, they prepare to deal with the rest of their lives.
Mainly it's just the indignity of not having your place, your home, places to go. I lived here because it's a simple, nice town, and it's gone.
Today, the forecast calls for the winds to increase, but only slightly. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Pacific Palisades, California.
And a Canadian Super Scooper aircraft fighting the fires in Los Angeles is grounded. It hit a drone flying over the flames overnight. The flames can be used to scoop up more than 5,000 liters of water to drop on active fires. The LA Fire Department says the plane from Quebec sustained wing damage, but there were no reported injuries. Donald Trump is expected to appear virtually in a New York courtroom today. The sentencing hearing in his hush money case will go ahead after the U.S. Supreme Court rejected his attempt to delay the proceedings. Trump was found guilty of falsifying business records in connection to payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Chris Reyes reports.
A jury of ordinary New Yorkers returned 34 guilty verdicts. Our function right now primarily is to continue to give voice to that verdict.
New York District Attorney Alvin Bragg has fought hard for this day to go forward, despite multiple attempts by Donald Trump's legal team to delay and dismiss the case altogether. The presiding judge, Justice Juan Merchan, agreed with the prosecution, writing in an earlier ruling that proceeding with the sentencing protects the sanctity of the jury's verdict. It's the final step in an unprecedented trial that lasted nearly 2 months. Sentencing would mean that Trump will start his second term with a criminal conviction, a first for a U.S. president. Trump railed against the case at a press conference earlier this week.
I call it the Injustice Department. What they've done is so bad. The whole world has watched that.
Justice Merchan said he wanted to finalize the case before Trump officially takes the White House in less than 2 weeks. In consideration of those unique circumstances, Merchan said Trump can appear virtually. He also signaled that Trump will not get jail time or fined for the 34 felony convictions, only an unconditional discharge. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Well, hello everyone. How you doing this morning? It is Friday. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Information Radio on CBC, your morning show on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. This half hour, we are going to be talking about Donald Trump, the president-elect, and threatening to make Canada the 51st state. There's been a lot of analysis of this. After, in this half hour of the show, we're going to hear from a First Nations leader after the headlines who says that these comments, quote, undermine the sovereignty of Indigenous peoples whose inherent rights to these lands long predate both nations, end quote. So stay tuned, we'll have that discussion. Also, headlines straight ahead with Heather Wells, as mentioned. We'll find out what's developing in news this morning. So what are you working on, Heather?
Good morning. Well, as you just heard on World Report, it is a rosy employment picture nationally, but not for this province. Statistics Canada this morning says this country added 91,000 jobs in December. However, Manitoba was the only province where employment actually dropped. In this province, the jobless rate actually rose with those fewer jobs, 0.4 percentage point, now at 6.2%. A Winnipeg woman says she's angry and does not trust the healthcare system after waiting 24 hours for care at the Health Sciences Centre. Rosemarie Figueroa is speaking out after hearing about the man who died while waiting in that hospital's ER earlier this week. We'll hear her story in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
Heather, I just want to read this stat to you. So you're talking about Manitoba and the jobs and how we're different from the national trends.
Right.
That's the second time this morning that Manitoba, our province, has been different from a national trend. In business news this morning, Christelle Ramlicam was talking about the cost of housing and the latest on rental prices. So the average asking rents nationally fell to just over $2,100. That's a 17-month low when you look nationally at the report. So they were down across Canada an average of 3.2%. However, Manitoba led all provinces for rent growth this year with a 5% increase to $1,618. So a couple of things there, happening where we're not in line with what's going on in the rest of the country, which I just found interesting.
Yeah, it is. We'll have to look into it.
Yeah. Lots of reasons why, obviously, and lots of complexity. So thank you.
Thank you.
Reports and numbers developing as we're on the air here. The weather has been actually pretty much, though, the same. Our temperature has been similar most of the morning, Abby.
Yes, it's been similar most morning, but now it's sliding. So we're now around that minus 12, and that's the condition in most parts of the southern regions. Cloudy skies, a slight chance of snow in most areas, and then that chilly wind chill is being felt. Currently, Winnipeg minus 12. We're going to see these cloudy conditions this morning, then a transition to a mix of sun and clouds. Light winds will continue. Temperatures dropping to around minus 15 by the afternoon. 7 period. The wind chill this morning makes it feel like minus 24. And for tonight, the cloudy conditions will return. We're going to see periods of snow starting near midnight, and we'll see our temperatures around minus 11. And for tomorrow, we have periods of snow expected throughout the day. We should be seeing about 5 centimeters of snow once the system goes through, though the winds will stay light. In other regions, we're seeing light snow, mix of sun and clouds, and chilly temperatures feeling like minus 25. Compared to Winnipeg, the north is far colder with that wind chill near minus 40 in Churchill. But right now, Winnipeg, we're at minus 12 and we'll drop to minus 15. And in traffic, nothing to report except for the plows just clearing, the snow that we've had on the ground. So in city, you'll see some of them on the highways. You'll definitely see them on the 59, 75, and the northern parts of the province. You see anything? Let us know. 788-3093.
8:15 is the time right now. Well, sovereignty. It is a word that has come up a lot more frequently since the United States President-elect Donald Trump talked about using, quote, economic force to get Canada to become part of the United States. This is Trump musing about making Canada, as he puts it, the 51st state.
Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada. But here's the problem with Canada. So many friends up there. I love the Canadian people. They're great. But we're spending hundreds of billions a year to protect it. We're spending hundreds of billions a year to take care of Canada.
So my next guest worries what Trump's threats could mean for Indigenous sovereignty. Cindy Woodhouse-Nepanak is the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations. She was born and raised in Penimutang First Nation here in Manitoba and joins us on the line. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
What are you thinking listening to President-elect Trump here?
Well, I just have to say we were, as National Chief, found that very offensive and alarming statements recently made by President-elect about his desire to force Canada to become part of the United States of America through economic coercion or other means. As First Nations, we reject these outlandish, disrespectful statements regarding our ancestral and traditional territories. The borders dividing Canada and the United States traverse the ancestral lands and traditional territories of many Indigenous peoples, tribes, and nations. We have inhabited our lands and territories since time immemorial, long before any colonial borders were established. And, this is why First Nations need to be at the table with First Ministers next week when they discuss these issues. It's 2025, and there shouldn't be a Team Canada approach without First Nations fully included and at the table. And I know that Ottawa's in a particular time right now. I get that. But, we are people, we're tribes and nations with inherent and treaty rights treaty rights to self-determination as recognized and affirmed in both the United Nations and the American Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We have entered into several international treaties with the Crown in respect to the United Kingdom and other nations. And we have and hold constitutional recognition and protections for our inherent treaty and human rights. Many First Nations have fought as allies of the British Crown in conflicts with the United States, but First Nations also have a long history of sacrifice, fighting for the freedoms of other nations, including the United States, in 2 world wars, in other conflicts. First Nations, we retain and exercise our inherent sovereignty and self-determined rights. We will continue to fight, protect, and uphold our sacred, inherent, and inalienable rights as peoples, tribes, and nations. So First Nations, we are also an integral to economic development on our lands and territories, as is our free, prior, and informed consent, respecting any development or political decisions by others. And we will continue to work with with the British Crown as treaty partners. We will work with Canada. I want to uplift Pierre Poilievre and Justin Trudeau for being united on this issue as
Yeah,
well.
if I may
And
interject, I actually have the quotes here, Chief, of what they have said. So I was going to ask you what you made of the responses. So Justin Trudeau said, quote, "Not a snowball's chance in hell. Canada will become the 51st state." And Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party, said, quote, to Trump, "Canada will never be the 51st state." End quote. What would you say if you were to have Donald Trump's ear right now?
I would tell him, drop the 51st state bullshit and understand who your friends are. I think I would leave it at that.
What's at stake for First Nations if the president-elect Donald Trump actually decided to act out on his remarks if he took office?
Well, I think there's a lot at stake, and I think that they have to, as I say, recognize who their friends are. We've been longtime allies and friends. We've been long before these borders even existed. There was trading between, First Peoples and peoples that came here, and I just think, is it to push off something else and I don't know. It's so alarming. It's disheartening to hear that, and I think Canadians are they're worried about that because we wonder what happens next if we don't talk about these things. And so it's so important as Canadians that we stand together as treaty partners, as inherent partners, that premiers and all political parties work together. I'm really glad that for once you seem to see the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party kind of being on the same messaging on this. I'm really glad to hear that. But at the same time, we also have First Nations people in this country that can't be left out of this important conversation. We're on each side of the border right across. We've got family and friends and allies, longtime allies over both sides of the medicine line that we have to work with. And I think, the president-elect to come to say such disparaging remarks is so hurtful, and it could take a long time to get back to where we were.
You mentioned the, obviously been talking about treaty rights, water rights, but you also mentioned the border. How, in your view, do First Nations in Canada view the border between Canada and the U.S.?
Well, certainly we always want to, we want to move more freely between the border, of course. I know that there's the Jay Treaty, and I don't know if you've ever, your listeners have ever heard of that, but there is a Jay Treaty that, because of these borders being made that are not our borders, we were to move more freely through. And I know that there's been many progress to date, and we'll continue to push for progress on that. And at the same time, I think that it's trade is so important between both countries, and I think this rhetoric of one getting more than the other, I don't think that's correct, and I think that we have to have a serious look at that and have serious conversations. And I think that we have a lot of allies in the on the American side, and we will continue to meet with them as the Assembly First Nations. Of course, we've got allies and friends on that side of the border that are also appalled about these statements. And so I think, Americans and Canadians have been longtime friends, and it's disheartening to hear such alarming comments from the president-elect.
You raised, obviously, the fact that you don't have a seat at the First Minister's meeting. And these meetings that are taking place next week, the premiers are going to meet with Trudeau, of course, because of what's been happening. And so, to that end, what have you done, or where have you reached out to try to get that seat?
Well, I'll have to say with the First Ministers meetings, and I think that has to also change in our beautiful country, because I think every time we have First Ministers meetings, for instance, on healthcare, a couple of years ago, they met, they had $60 billion to talk about, to divvy up in this country on healthcare. And they have First Nations people the day before talk to us for a couple of hours. And well, we appreciate that, having our time with the premiers and the First Ministers. It's also kind of insulting because they're there talking about First Nations people in this country, and they're like, we'll talk to you at the little kiddie table the day before, and then we'll really get down to business, close the door, and have those discussions within. And I think that those formats have to change in this country.
Earlier, I just want to ask you a last question, Chief Woodhouse, because earlier in the program, Woodhouse Napinak rather, we were talking to an analyst, Tom Schaller, he's in Washington, D.C., who was looking at Trump's comments, about the 51st state. And he was saying he largely believes their rhetoric, but on the other hand, he says the more interesting response will be to see what Canadians do with them. And so obviously we've read the responses from the leaders right now, the outgoing leader, the Liberals, our Prime Minister, and then also Pierre Poilievre and Justin Trudeau. But he was sort of alluding to the fact that it's really he's interested to watch what Canadians will do with this, whether or not there will be sort of some part of the population that will be somehow on board with this. What is your view of that? Is that something that concerns you, or is that outside of your concerns?
I think if there's one thing that's united Canadians right now, I think it's this issue. It's this issue because it's somebody questioning who we are as a country, our history. We have a long history, even though it's not always an easy history. It's sometimes a dark history, but it is our history, and we do have relationships that have been here for a long time, and between Indigenous peoples and the newcomers that have come to this beautiful country, and we're trying to create this beautiful new country together. It's not always easy. It's not always bumpy. Neither is the United States, and to have these, like I say, these alarming comments to question our sovereignty is just outrageous.
Thank you very much for your time this morning and being live with us here on CBC. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That is Cindy Woodhouse Napinak, National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations.
When you have to leave everything behind,
you're just trying to find a way to stay here for a better life.
What are the real costs of making a new start?
I have faced so many hardships financially, emotionally, and physically.
A CBC News series looks at what it's really like for newcomers.
I am losing hope.
Welcome to Canada, the immigrant experience.
Prepare yourself because coming here is not that easy.
Everywhere you get CBC News.
Well, we got a bit of time for music on your Friday morning show here, right before we get to the news. And it comes from Fraser Teeple, who says his 2 decades working as an arborist have informed his approach to music. He says it's like a tradesman, with a deep respect for the tradition and a dedication to mastering his skill. We'll see if we can hear it in this. This is from his forthcoming album. It's called We Built a Fire. Fraser Temple on CBC. The tune's called Went Off.
Lit it up behind the wheel. Didn't give a damn about the fire in my blood. Burned a hole in a dead-end street. Hurt a man and it didn't hurt me. And the white eyes stare me down. Don't know how I got unlucky in this highway town. Way off like a gunshot. With my head at the door. Till my car stopped spinning. They were pulling off the doors. Burning my dreams down to hurt with me. Almost funny how about the bull bounced. So hang it out on me, more unlucky. And the birds keep cycling. In my hand from the time I was 8. I worked on the farm fixing things that break. I left school for the shop, but I held my pride. Now I'm stuck on the porch telling the man outside how to change his winter tires. And the sun goes down on the street and it looks like fire. Way off like a gunshot. With my head hit the floor. Till my ring stopped spinning. They were pulling down the doors. Shut my dreams down, took the work from me. Almost funny how bad the ball bounced. So hang it out on me, more unlucky. And the birds keep circling. Like a gunshot. It's pulling me down, pulling me down. Like a gunshot. Gunshot. and the birds keep circling.
Music this morning from Fraser Teeple, who has a forthcoming album coming up called We Built a Fire, and that tune is called Went Off. It is coming up to news time at 8:30, but we're also coming up to the end of the week. So I want to give the big list of thank yous to the people that work in our current affairs unit at CBC Manitoba for all of the programs. So our associate producers are Corey Funk, Abby Adiemi, Kalkadam Mulugeta, as well as Sierra Sanders, Chidi Akuma, May McKillop, who's also been directing, Marshall Hodgins, Dylan Longhurst, Cameron Ponto, Issa Kickson, Chloe Friesen, who's been hosting this week, as well as Bruce Layden. Nadia Kidwai is also a host in unit. CA reporters Shanley Vidal and Jim Agapito. Our YouTube producer is Kevin Nipatebo. Intern Chin Kai Chang has been also behind the controls this morning. Good job, Chin. Wendy Parker is a producer in our unit. Nellie Gonzalez is the show's producer of Current Affairs Unit overall. She produces all the programs. And our overall boss, Leif Larson, our manager, senior producer of audio here at CBC Manitoba. So thank you to everybody who works so hard, and thank you for all of your work this week and every week. To our news department as well, Heather Wells, Joni Nicolo, Aaron Broman, as well as Megan Ketchison on Chase. Thank you, guys. And also our live crew, of course, whose names I mentioned in that list. We're going to hear from them as well one more time, or from Abby one more time, with our latest weather traffic to 8:30. But right now it is time for your 8:30 news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. And at 8:30, it is minus 12 right now. Temperature is going to keep sliding to about minus 15 this afternoon as the sky clears, although overnight snow moves in, lasting until tomorrow, about 5 centimeters in the forecast. Manitoba is bucking the trend when it comes to employment. The latest job numbers are out from Statistics Canada this morning. Nationally, this country added 91,000 jobs in December, shattering expectations, and it pushed the national unemployment rate down 0.1 percentage points to 6.7%. Manitoba was the only province where employment dropped because in this province, the jobless rate rose last month. With fewer jobs out there in December, Manitoba's unemployment rate rose to 6.2%. A Winnipeg woman says she does not trust the healthcare system after waiting 24 hours for care at the Health Sciences Centre. Rosemarie Figueroa is speaking out after hearing about the man who died while waiting in that hospital's ER earlier this week. In late November, Figueroa says her family doctor recommended she go to the ER over concerns her cough and difficulty breathing were symptoms of a pulmonary embolism. She says a doctor at Seven Oaks agreed, giving her medications and ordering the scans she needed. But that didn't happen before she first waited 24 hours at HSC without being seen and then went to Seven Oaks.
Feeling emotional because this has not had just happened to me. It's been happening to everybody else, right? Our lives is very, very much dependent on those people who are in front of the triage. So they decide whether they push you in or they don't. It's just so sad.
Sherrod Health says while the highest acuity patients are seen first, other patients are checked on and reassessed according to their initial triage. The mother of a man stabbed to death outside an Arlington Street beer vendor says her heart aches all the time. That from a victim impact statement from Doris Kershane, whose son Enrique George Kershane died in 2022. A dozen of his family members were in court yesterday for the sentencing hearing. 39-year-old Cecil Vance Roulette was found guilty of manslaughter in November. Court heard Kershane and his brother were at a beer vendor at Arlington and Logan when they met up with 3 other men. Surveillance shows at first they were all laughing, shaking hands, but once outside, the men attacked Kershane's brother. That's when Kershane jumped in and wrestled Roulette to the ground. The Crown says Roulette stabbed him multiple times. It is asking for a sentence of 13 years, less time served. Now to Los Angeles, where the number of fatalities from that ongoing wildfire emergency continues to climb. 10 deaths now are being attributed to the fires. 5 blazes are still burning. 1 remains out of control, with the other 4 partially contained. An estimated 10,000 structures have been destroyed. Most of them are homes. And Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass says she's already looking at a major rebuilding initiative.
The city of Los Angeles will lead in this effort in the areas that are impacted by the city. We are going to clear the red tape and unnecessary delays and cost and headaches that people experience in ordinary times so that we can rebuild your homes quickly.
Meanwhile, Los Angeles police believe at least one of the fires was deliberately set. They do have a suspect in custody. The Manitoba First Nations Police Service has named an interim chief following the death of its police chief. Doug Paulson died in a house fire Wednesday morning. Inspector Jason Cullen will step into the chief's role for the foreseeable future. Paulson is being remembered as a dedicated leader and trailblazer in First Nations policing. A researcher from the University of Manitoba is part of an international team of scientists who have drilled what is believed to be the world's longest continuous record of ice at a remote site in Antarctica. The 2,800-meter ice core is expected to reveal Earth's historical climate patterns going back more than 1.2 million years. John Higgins is a member of the U.S. National Science Foundation Center for Oldest Ice Research and Exploration.
Ice cores give us really a unique record of Earth's past in that they trap little bits of essentially ancient atmosphere. And so they're really the closest you can get to going back in a time machine and being able to measure what the atmosphere was like in the past.
This research project involved collaboration between scientific and logistical teams from across Europe. You can find more Manitoba news from across the province on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Have a great weekend, Heather Wells. Thank you.
Thank you, too.
All right, let's have this last look at weather and traffic with Abby.
We're looking at cloudy, light snow, and we're going to see some sunny breaks here and there in some regions today. In the southern part of the province, like Winnipeg and Brandon, we should see cloudy conditions, and that sunny break will be happening. And temperatures dropping to around -15, -16 in most of the regions. But farther north you go, you're going to be seeing that wind chill racing to -40. Compared to Winnipeg, we're the warm part of the province.
All right, we did it.
Mm-hmm.
It's Friday.
It's Friday. Go into the weekend and enjoy it.
Right? All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
And I say that not just for us here, but for all of Manitoba, right? I think that if you are a Monday to Friday worker and maybe you were lucky enough to have some time off over the holiday break, this was the first full week back. So that's the case for a lot of folks. And if that's the case for you, you're close. You're close to the weekend. Enjoy the rest of the day, everyone, and have a safe, wonderful day in our beautiful home province of Manitoba. Take care and be well. And remember the Weekend Morning Show here on CBC for you. More local programming through the day on Radio Noon. And don't forget to call in if you want to weigh in on their question today. You got to tune in at 12:30. And also this afternoon, Up to Speed. Chloe Friesen's been guest hosting, and you can hear that show from 3 to 6. My name is Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC, and we'll talk to you again on Monday.